ציפורים, ונקת תהילים, צועדת על הים, נוצרת צפנים, פורצת ושקיעה עמדה יום וליל, אמרתה היכלתי לדורות מלכות לחיים, תרגיש לעומר ונתרא, ונראה לפני פורתנו, אילנות ניתן לפרוגת, מפלצות הסלע, נשים לנו בבית, שרית בקודש נזיר, אמו ידעה לפסון ירי, לחם היית לצלם, מן האדמה פירותייך נותן, יודע אשר בכל לב, מספרה כל נפלאותייך.
אשת חיל ממצא ורחוק מפנינים
בטח בלב בעלה ושלה לא יחסה
גמל תותו ולא רע כל ימי חייה דרשה צמר ופשתים רטס וחפץ כפיה
הייתה קוניות סוחר ממרחק תבין לחמה
ותקום מאוד לילה
ותיתן טרף לביתה וחוק לנערותיה זמם השדה ותיקחהו מפרי כפיה נתקרם חגרה בעוזמותיה ותם בזרועותיה
טעמה כי טוב סחרה לא יחווה בלילה נר ידיה שילחה בקישו וכפיה תמכו פלך
כפה פרסה ליעני וידיה שילחה ליבול הותירה לבית המשלג ככל ביתה לבושני מרבדים עשתה לה שש בה כמן לבושה נורדה בשער עם בעלה בשבטו היא מזיקני ארץ סלבין נסתה בתינקו וחבו נקנה לקנני עוזר וידר לבושה ותשחק ליום אחרון
בעלה ושלה לא יחסה
היא פתחה בחוכמה בתורת חסד על לשון
סופיה הליכות לביתה ולחם עצלות לא דוחה
כמובניה וישרועה בעלה ויהללה רבות בנות עשו חיים ואת עלית על כולנה אדוני היא תתהלל תנו לה מפרי ידיה והללויה בשערים מעשיה.
אשת חיל נמצא ורחוק מפני מכלה פתח בלב בעלה ושרה לא יחסר מלאה אותו ברוע בימי חייה
לבשה צללות אשתי בדס וחפץ כפיה הייתה כאוניות סוחר ממרחק תביא לחמה
בקם מאוד לילה וליטה בחוק מהעודיה זרם השדה ותיקחהו מפרי כפיה נבה הכרם חגרה בעוד מודיה בתיה מזרותיה טעמה כי טוב שכרה לא יכתב הלילה נראה ידיה שילחה בגישור וכפיה תם פורפלת כפה פרסה לעלי וידיה שילחה לעליון לא תירה לביתה משאלה כי כל דיסה לבושנים מעמדים עשתה לשש ואדמה נבושה נותר השערים בעלה בשלטון זקני ארץ סדין עשתה ותמכור וחגור נתנה לכנעני עוד הדר לבושה במשחק ליום בחרו לא פתחה בחוכמה לתורת חסד הראשונה תופיע הליכות ביתה ולכם עשרות לא תובל קמו בליה וישוע בעלה ויהללה רבות בנות עשו חיל ואת עלית על כולן השקשק לכם מהבל היופי אישה יראת אדוני היא תתהלל.
Okay, we're in the desert. It's thousands of years ago, years before the suffragettes, eons before the women's rights movement, and way before the history of the traveling pantsuit. It's hot, it's dry, a bunch of drama has just gone down. Loose morals, idolatry, an angry God, 24,000 people dead of a holy plague. Pinchas, who this Parshah is named after, calms everyone down by flying into a totally holy rage and killing two lovers who may or may not have been doing something very inappropriate. With a spear. Through the both of them. Ready for some more drama? Tzelafchad, one of the elders of the tribe of Manasseh, has to go and die. We don't know why. The Torah introduces him, and then 3 lines later, he's kicking the bucket. Now, Homi has 5 daughters, Mala, Noah, Hogla, Milcha, and Tirzah. And would you believe it? Not a one of them is married. For the gals, this does not bode well. Why? Well, because according to the laws of the time, women couldn't inherit property. When a man died, his property automatically went to his sons. No sons? The estate would go to his brothers or his parents, but not his daughters. Tzelafchad's daughters were virtuous. They were wise and powerful women. So what did they do? They went to the tent of meeting in front of all the chieftains and the whole congregation and petitioned Moses and Aaron's son, the priest Elazar, like, why should the name of our father be done away from among his family because he had no son? Give us a portion along with our father's brothers. They made a rock-solid case and reminded Moses and Elazar that their father died as a good man, not one of those fools who rebelled with Korach. What seems like an obvious case today had never been raised at the time, so this was huge. Moses sensed the enormity of the issue, so he went right to God and asked God what to do. God knows what's up. So God goes back to Moses and says, the plea of Tzelafchad's daughters is just. You should give them an inheritance along with their uncles. In other words, God votes with the daughters of Tzelafchad. Then God goes and takes it a step further and actually amends the laws of inheritance, the laws of the Torah, to take the women into account. God tells Moses that if a man dies without leaving sons, you must transfer his property to his daughters. What's totally awesome about the story of the daughters of Tzelafchad is that even though they were on an unprecedented tip, before they said anything, no one in the entire 1 million-plus person caravan of the children of Israel had ever said anything about this. But when the daughters of Tzelafchad did, nobody questioned them. They went straight to Moses, and then Moses took their issue up with God directly. These women protested their unfair treatment, and as a result, the laws were changed for all people thereafter. Awesome. There was one stipulation. A few Torah portions later, some high-ranking men from the tribe of Manasseh complained to Moses that if the daughters of Tzelafchad marry husbands who are part of a different tribe, then their land, the land that's supposed to belong to the tribe of Manasseh forever, would become part of that other tribe's property. Okay, that's not fair. So Moses decided that the daughters could marry whomever they wanted as long as they were part of the Menashe tribe. Yeah, it's a bit weird to tell the daughters that they have to marry their cousins, even if they might be 12th or 15th cousins. But they stood up for what they believed in, and they got it. Baby steps.
Well, that's an interesting legal take on that, for certain.
I'm confused. Why would they have married a 12th or 13th cousin if they had like a second or third cousin available? First cousin preferably. Again, I know how those, how those family relations went back then.
No, we're not talking about Abraham and Isaac and Jacob anymore. They've evolved past that close of marital relations with family.
Well, you still have that going on with Dinah.
Not according to the red tent, because apparently, honestly, I don't know. That's just a bit of a pet peeve. Like, they had the perfect opportunity to, connect. But I think maybe the whole point was that they wanted her to go off in her own direction and not be bound to the Israelites in some way. Which
No, I know. Well, didn't she end up marrying a cousin or a brother or something?
I don't know. Like, the guy's name was like Benaiah or something. Like, come on, Ben-Yah.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's interesting. This is one of the more things that I wonder if everybody, when talking about leadership in this context, they're
very end of Deuteronomy.
I wonder how many people talk about Tzelafchad and how many people are talking about Pinchas, because honestly, Pinchas is kind of I mean, like, in all honesty, like, he's a good guy in the narrative, but like, he's a murderer. I don't know.
Yeah, but did that person deserve killing? That's the important point, right?
I don't know. Maybe you could put them in jail for a night, put them in the drunk tank. I think there's a big gap between, not doing anything and then, executing someone for committing a crime. But that's just me.
Yeah, I wanted to say there was a Greek tyrant who did that, where every crime was executable, but what was a lethal penalty. Yeah, he didn't last long. The people didn't like that.
Wait, was that? I don't remember who.
I forget off the top of my head, but yeah.
Very last chapter in the Torah. We still have an entire book to go, but it's really we're towards the end of the book of Numbers. Moses doesn't pass away until the very end of Deuteronomy, the very last chapter in the Torah. We still have an entire book to go, but it's really here. Vayomer Hashem el Moshe. God said to Moses, Alei el har ha'avarim hazeh, ascend this mountain of Avarim, u'ra'ei et ha'aretz asher natati l'bnei Yisrael, and see the land that I'm giving to the children of Israel. V'ra'ita ota, and when you see it, v'ne'asafta alamecha gam ata kasher ne'asaf Aaron achicha. You will be gathered.
That's interesting. So it says, there's another way you could read that, because without the nekudot, the har el har ha'avarim could also be har ha'ivrim, the mountain of the Hebrews. So I don't know, it's kind of interesting.
Probably another mountain we have no idea where it actually sits, right?
Probably.
For death, you're going to die, just like your brother Aaron did. Now, God repeats this command in its proper place, right where we'd expect it at the end of Deuteronomy. And as many of the biblical commentators point out, the story really doesn't happen here at all. It happens at the very end of the Torah. So why is it here? Why does the Torah choose to tell the story now? Sometimes the Torah takes a few stories that happen at all different times and puts them together in order to highlight a common theme. After all, the Torah is not just a history book. The stories are there to help guide us in life. Rabbi Foreman actually talks about this paradigm back in Parsha𓂋. So if grouping together out-of-order stories can highlight a certain theme that can teach us something really valuable, the Torah will put them together instead of keeping them all in chronological order. So maybe that's what's going on here. Maybe the story of Moses' death is thematically related to the stories that happened before it here in Parsha Pinchas. But when you take a look at those stories, it doesn't seem like they have anything in common with Moses' death at all. The Parsha begins relating the reward for Pinchas' act of zealotry, in which he killed 2 public sinners and ended this devastating plague against the children of Israel. Then the Parsha continues with a detailed census of the Israelite camp. And then it relates a very legalistic narrative of the daughters of Tzelafchad who sought to receive the inheritance of their father when the normal rules of inheritance didn't apply. And then immediately after these 3 stories, we have this story of God's command for Moses to ascend the mountain where he'll die. And it seems entirely unrelated to any of these stories.
Wait, so basically what this guy's trying to tell me is that Parsha𓂋𝆗Pinhas is the holy mountain of the Torah.
Yeah, it kind of sounds that way. Well, one of the many holy mountains.
No. Yeah, but I'm talking about like the movie, how it's like everything's kind of disconnected from everything else, and then you have like the colorful pictures. Like right here, it kind of reminded me, and then also just the whole thing about ascending the mountain to reach this new state of existence.
Well, don't forget a bunch of young girls. That's always good to throw in as well.
Oh, you mean the daughters of Tzelafchad?
Yep.
Well, I mean, to be fair, I think in Holy Mountain, I mean, no, it was they didn't focus on that at all. At least not in the context of like the people who were, ascending the Holy Mountain.
No, they just had them with the shaving the heads and in the framing pieces. Yeah.
The what? Framing piece?
Framing piece. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
His death in the 3 earlier stories, I want to suggest that there may actually be one central theme that wends its way throughout all of these seemingly unrelated stories. And that theme is legacy. Let's look at the first story. After Pinchas' act of zealotry, God gives him a reward. Hineni noten lo et briti shalom. I'm giving Pinchas my covenant of peace. V'haita lo ulazaro acharav brit kunat olam. And it shall be for him and for all the generations that come from him, an everlasting covenant of priesthood. Pinchas' reward wasn't just for him. It was for all his future descendants. All of priesthood would forever come from him. He secured his legacy for all time. So that's the first story. Now let's look at the second story. Right after Pinchas' reward, God commands Moses to take a census of the people. But this census is very different than the only other major census in the Torah, back at the beginning of Numbers. In that earlier census, the text only gives us a number of the population of each tribe. Here in our Parsha, it's much more robust. The text lists the names of all of the genealogical descending families of each tribe. And this tribe had this many children, and these were their names. And each one of them had this many children, and these were their names, and so on. Why does our census include all of these details, all of the names of the different descendants? Well, why is there a census here in the first place? We're at the end of a 40-year journey in the desert, and the people are about to enter the land. The census is listing the descendants of each tribe, who will eventually get their own portion of land in the land of Israel. La'ela tichalek ha'aretz b'nachala. For these people, the people in the census, divide the land as an inheritance. These are the people who will settle the land as representatives of their tribes, as representatives of their families. Essentially, this is a census of the legacy of each tribe, of those who will carry on the names of their parents. And in fact, the third story, the story of the daughters of Tzelafchad, make it very clear that the census was really about legacy. Immediately following the census, the daughters of Tzelafchad approach Moses with the following claim. Avinu meit bamidbar, uvanim lo hayula. Our father died in the desert, but he had no sons. No sons to inherit their father's eventual portion of land in Israel. But listen to the words they use to make the claim. They don't just say, please let us inherit our father's property. Lama yigara shem avinu mitoch mishpachta. Why should the name of our father be erased just because he has no sons? Tana lanu achuza b'toch achei avinu. Give us the portion of land as our brothers would have had. What they were asking for in actuality was land. But it wasn't just about wealth. It was about something much bigger. It was about legacy. Why should the name of our father be wiped out? Let us continue. And God lets them. God grants their request. And he has Moses announce this new rule to everyone. When a father doesn't have sons, it goes to the daughters. And if there are no daughters, then it goes to his father's brothers, and so on. The text is emphasizing that even when the normal rules of inheritance don't apply, there are contingency plans to make sure that everyone gets a shot at continued legacy. So, all three stories really are about legacy. But if you look closely, there's also a subtle tension in the text. Moshe seems to play a prominent role in all three stories. But Moses' own legacy seems to be consistently missing from the stories. And it seems that the text itself does everything it can to draw our attention to it. In the story of Pinchas, who's the one to deliver the message of Pinchas' reward? It's Moses. Now, that's not so unique. Moses is very often God's mouthpiece. But if you were Moses and you were making this announcement, you can't help but notice that it's your brother's legacy that's being established. Pinchas was Aaron's grandson, Moses' great-nephew. It might even make Moses start to think of his own legacy. It's great for my brother, but what will be of me? Then in the next story, the story of the census, at the very end of the list, we meet the family of Levi, the tribe of Moses and Aaron. The text lists both Moses and Aaron as part of the lineage. And then, just like we'd expect, it begins to list the children of that next generation. It lists Aaron's sons. But then, as if to be as deliberate as possible, right when we'd expect a list of Moses' children, the census ends. Moses had children, Gershom and Eliezer. What happened to them? They should be there, and their absence is glaring. And you know who's taking the census? It's Moses himself, along with his nephew Elazar. Again, Moses is the one announcing the legacy of everyone else, and his own legacy is nowhere to be found. If Moses wasn't thinking about his own legacy earlier with Pinchas, he's probably thinking about it here. So first we have his brother's legacy, and then we have everyone else's legacy. The last story is about those whose legacies haven't been accounted for. So maybe Moses' legacy is going to be here. But again, look at Moses' role in that final story. He's the one to whom the daughters of Tzelafchad bring their claim. He's the one that delivers the news to all of the people, guaranteeing legacy for everyone. We, and probably Moses too, can't help but think, what about Moses? Even people who would not normally have legacy. Here, they're ensured legacy. What about Moses? Moses did have sons. What about him? And now, after all this, we get to our story, where God tells Moses to ascend the mountain where he'll die. Now, let's play our game one more time. If you were Moses and you just heard about your own death, and you've just seen Pinchas secure your brother's legacy, you saw all of Israel secure their legacy in the census, which you were left out of, and you saw the daughters of Tzelafchad secure their legacy, what would you be thinking? How would you react? It would be the last straw. That's it? I'm just gonna die? What about my legacy? How will my name continue? But that's not how Moses reacts. Yifkod Hashem Elokei haruchot l'chol basar ish al ha'ida. God of all living things appoints someone over this people. V'lo tiyeh adat Hashem katzon asher ein lahem ro'eh. Don't let the people be a flock without a shepherd. Moses doesn't ask for his own legacy. He simply asks for the people. They need a leader. It's almost as though Moses concedes. He realizes that he himself won't have a legacy. But still, look at the word Moses uses for appoint. Yifkod. We've seen that word. That's the word used back in the census when the legacies of each tribe were being counted. Implicit in Moses' words, you can almost hear his cry. There's a tinge of longing in his words. Yifkod. God, what about my pikudim? Appoint a legacy for me. Now, if we just look one verse later, we see that the new leader is going to be Joshua, not a relative or child of Moses. Moses' general request for a new leader, that's answered, but it seems that his more subtle plea for legacy goes entirely ignored. But maybe not. Look how God responds. Vayomer Hashem el Moshe, God says to Moses, Kach lecha et Yoshua ben Nun, ish asher ruach bo. Take Joshua, a man who has spirit in him, v'samachta et yadcha alav, and lean your hands on him. A little bit later, v'natata mehotcha alav, and give of your own glory to him. Joshua isn't just a new, totally independent leader from the previous leadership. He's continuing Moses' leadership. He's an extension of Moses' leadership. The verses emphasize that Moses has to pass on that leadership to Joshua. He puts his hands on Joshua. He gives of his glory to Joshua. He takes of himself and he infuses that into Joshua. Moses, you do have a legacy. No, it's not a biological legacy. That's not what leadership is about. Leadership is about facilitating the needs of the community. Moses, everything you've done and been for the people, that's your legacy. And that will continue with someone who will devote himself to continuing it. Who was Joshua? He was Misharet Moshe. He dedicated himself to serving Moses and his mission. He minimized himself for the purpose of serving another. And now look at Moses' own analogy of what leadership should be. V'lo tiyah dat Hashem ketzon asher ein lahem roeh. Don't let the people be a flock without a shepherd. A shepherd is not about himself at all. He's entirely about the flock. That's what Moses was. And that's who Joshua was. He minimized himself for a larger value, for a larger mission. That's the perfect leader, one who makes himself secondary to the needs of the group. That's what was being transferred to Joshua. That was Moses' legacy that was being continued on top of the mountain. And now look at the name of the mountain on which this all happens. God says, Alei el har ha'avarim hazeh, ascend the mountain of Avarim. Avarim. We just saw that word back in the story of the daughters of Tzelafchad. God says, yes, the daughters of Tzelafchad are right. V'ha'avarta et nachalat aviyam lahen, and the inheritance of their father should pass over to them. Before this, they didn't have a claim to the land at all, but that changes here. And the mechanism through which that changes is ha'avarta. The land transfers over and continues with them. Here on this mountain, Har Ha'avarim, it's as if God is saying, Moses, come up to this mountain, the mountain of continuing legacies, on which your legacy will continue. That's why this story of Moses' death is here, in the middle of Pinchas. It's to draw our attention to the story and to tell us, hey, carrying on someone's ideas, someone's ideology, someone's values, that's a way to continue a person's legacy also. Beyond just biological legacy, God's teaching us that when it comes to leadership, that's the only type of legacy that matters. And that's the legacy of leadership.
Interesting. Kind of reminds me of the concept of like, Dr. Vater and Dr. Mutter. You know what I mean?
No, I'm not familiar with that.
Directly translates from German into Dr. Father and Dr. Mother. It basically means the person who like basically trained you to be a doctor. So that could apply to. I mean, it's probably going to be a bit more different. Like if you're like a medical doctor, because you're going to have a lot of people training you. I mean, not that it wouldn't be the same case with a PhD, but you're more.
Yeah, what I was going to say, yeah, the use for PhDs, where it's very much the sponsor for a PhD candidate. Yeah.
Yeah, just kind of the idea of like associating this idea of parentage or motherhood or fatherhood in a certain context with idea as well. Which, you know, we use it like, oh, you know, this person's the grandmother of this movement, this person's the father of this movement. Like, you know, why don't we say the founder? It's because there's, I don't know, some symbolic, like it's this idea that you're passing on a gene, but it's not a physical gene, it's a mental or a sociological one, which would be a meme.
Makes sense. Now, did Joshua have to run his hand up Moses' thigh in order to get the blessing?
I mean, I think that's how you make it official back then, but, you know.
I was going to say, I was just wondering, it's, you know, and I was, you know, I had my notes there. I was going to say that census, that was probably the only time you had a list, you had any claim for a list of real Jews, other than they were Hebrews, but not Jews at that point.
What do you mean?
Well, you know how they're always arguing who is and who isn't a real Jew? Well, that list of that census, that's probably as close as anybody ever got to a list of who the real Jews were.
Yeah, but then you're going to have the Black Hebrew Israelites arguing with the white Christians, arguing with the Jehovah's Witnesses, arguing with the Jews over the pronunciation, and they'll say, okay, well, Joshua is not Yehoshua, is not Yeshua, is it, like, I don't know. I feel like it would just go even crazier.
And I was going to say, I had a note there when they were talking about, Moses being God's mouthpiece. I was going to say, yeah, I think that's something all of the Hebrews could agree with, is Moses was definitely one of God's orifices.
Ha ha, hardy har har.
Well, at least that was Korah's opinion too.
Wait, you're saying that the whole that swallowed up Korah was actually just Moses? Moses was just really hungry?
It could have been. Or, again, could have been another part, another orifice. You never know. Tag.
Interesting. What can I find? Wait, what's this? A mother in Israel? That's interesting. That's referencing Ezekiel, I think. Or no, maybe Deborah?
Shalom. This week's Torah portion is Pinchas, beginning in the book of Numbers, chapter 25 and verse 10. Our Parsha begins abruptly as a direct continuation of the drama that took place before our eyes at the end of last week's portion of Balak. When the wicked Bilam realized that he had failed at cursing the children of Israel, he switched to plan B, his last-ditch effort. Knowing how the God of Israel despises all forms of sexual immorality, Bilam counseled King Balak of Moab to ensnare the Israelite men to commit sexual sins with the Moabite women in an attempt to drive Israel down a path that would lead to its destruction. Counseled King Balak of Moab to ensnare the sexual immorality. Bilam counseled King Balak of Moab to ensnare the Israelite men to commit sexual sins with the Moabite women in an attempt to drive Israel down a path that would lead to its destruction. So Moab embarked upon a campaign to destroy the nation of Israel by craftily weaponizing their own daughters to strike at the very foundation upon which the nation of Israel is built, their purity.
I'm sorry, weaponizing daughters, that sounds a bit too familiar. Almost sounds like someone who's been going around saying some stuff lately. I don't know. The idea of weaponizing kids, whether it's for war or anything, I don't know. It's weird.
Well, I guess somebody could say it was an old biblical tradition.
Yeah, but it's just an old tradition, I guess, something that humanity's been doing since the dawn of time.
Oh, there's lots of things that are old biblical traditions that are no reason we should keep them up, too. I don't really want to go out and live in a tent in the desert. Sorry, that's not my call.
Or whenever you imagine if you just to go to get like a lease or like an extension on rent or something, instead of having to sign your name, you have to grab the person that you're trying to get to like agree to this. You have to grab their junk, and that's just like normal societal shit. Like that's
it would definitely make the courtrooms a whole lot more interesting. Tag.
Interesting's a word.
It seemed that the plan could work. The Moabite women, whose true intention was to get the men to worship the Baal Peor idolatry, they succeeded in seducing many of the Israelite men, and a plague began to wreak destruction on the people. And there, at the end of Parshat Balak, we learned that in the midst of it all, a horrific incident occurred. One of the tribal leaders of Israel, named in our Parsha as Zimri, the son of Salu, a prince of the tribe of Shimon, in an act of unspeakable brazenness, he took a Midianite woman and committed a sexual act with her before the very eyes of Moshe, the elders, and the entire assembly. Somehow, Moshe and the elders were rendered powerless, unable to respond. A strange situation described cryptically by verse 6 as they were weeping at the entrance to the tent of meeting. What it was that by divine providence, the truth of what needed to be done was hidden from Moshe, because the hour of Pinchas had arrived. It was the action of Pinchas demonstrating a new type of leadership which would characterize and which was needed by this new generation of the land. That's what it was that turned back God's wrath and earned him eternal priesthood and the divine covenant of peace. And now, continuing the theme of the sanctity of the family unit and this unique new generation that's preparing to enter into the promised land, in the beginning of our portions, chapter 27, we encounter the story of the daughters of Tzelafchad. We read, the daughters of Tzelafchad, son of Ķephər, son of Gilad, son of Machir, son of Menashe, of the families of Menashe, son of Joseph, drew near. And these are the names of his daughters, Machla, Noah, Hoglah, Milcah, and Tirzah. And they stood before Moshe, before Elazar the Kohen, and before the leaders and the entire assembly at the entrance to the tent of meeting, saying, our father died in the wilderness, but he was not among the assembly that was gathering against Hashem in the gathering of Korach, but he died of his own sin, and he had no sons. Why should the name of our father be omitted from among his family because he had no son? Give us a possession among our father's brothers. And Moshe brought their claim before Hashem. And we read that Hashem told Moshe that they're correct. And though hitherto the inheritance of the land to be divided into tribal portions upon their entrance would have been patrilinear, the initiative of these women succeeded in creating a new reality in Torah law, straight from the mouth of Hashem, much like the earlier initiative of the second Passover. But open up your heart. Who are these women really? And what was their request really all about? One of the most intriguing aspects of the story begins with their father.
Very controversial answer, but
who was this mysterious man, Tzelafchad, and why is his death singled out? Torah here records his genealogy in verse 1, but what else do we know about him? The daughters mention that Tzelafchad died in his own sin. He did not belong to the faction of Korach, and we know that neither was he among the complainers. But if he was not included in these collective sins of the generation, what indeed was the cause of his death? So firstly, you should know that an examination of the background of Tzelafchad by our sages sheds light on his identity as a righteous and learned individual, known for his piety, wisdom, and commitment to upholding Torah's teachings. And the singling out of his death can be understood as a recognition of his stature. The great sages offer varying opinions as to his identity and as to what was the nature of his sin, but one of the most universally accepted views is that of the great Rabbi Akiva, who teaches that Tzelafchad was none other than the man who gathered sticks on Shabbat, in that incident that we learned about back in Numbers chapter 15. This was a public desecration of the Sabbath in violation of the commandment to refrain from work on the day of rest as God commanded. The consequences of purposely violating the Sabbath are significant, and this interpretation suggests that Tzelafchad's death was a direct result of that act. But you should also know that there is ample reason to believe that Tzelafchad's actions were driven by a sincere himself to take one for the team, so to speak, to teach a lesson about the importance of Sabbath observance and how seriously it should be taken, and to inspire the children of Israel, now resigned to their fate and hunkering down for 38 years of stagnation in the desert, to inspire them not to become lax or complacent in their responsibility to uphold God's covenants, but to maintain their commitment to the divine commandments. The name Tzelafchad is made up of two components, Tzel, meaning shadow or reflection, and Pachad, meaning awe. A mystical insight informs us that his name conveys the idea of uncovering hidden spiritual dimensions of reality and approaching them with a sense of awe and humility. It's an indication of seeking the divine presence in the shadows of the world and living with reverence and awe of the divine. The secret of his name lends support to the idea that Tzelafchad's action was motivated by sincerity, awe, and reverence. The association of tzel, shadow, and pachad, awe, conveys a sense of humility and profound respect and aligns with the notion that Tzelafchad's actions may have been driven by a deep spiritual consciousness and awareness and a desire to uphold the sanctity of God's commandments. In any event, his very name points to the possibility that the actions that led to his death, whether he was the gatherer of sticks or not, were inspired by a genuine commitment to honor Hashem and to uphold the sacred commandments of his Torah. Whatever Tzelafchad's sin was, the fact that Torah treats it as an individual act distinct from the larger communal sins of his generation highlights the unique merit and spiritual stature of his daughters, Machla, Noah, 𝐤𝐤�, Milcah, and Tirzah, who sought to keep their father's legacy alive by claiming their rightful inheritance in the land of Israel despite their father's untimely death. And the story of the daughters of Tzelafchad has many dimensions. Now, while there are important halachic ramifications concerning the laws of inheritance and the precedent of their case, now I would like to focus on their greatness on a spiritual level. So again, who were these women and what was their request really all about? The Midrash praises them for their wisdom and righteousness, contrasting their love for the land of Israel with the lack of enthusiasm shown by the generation of the spies. The daughter's desire to inherit the land is portrayed as a rectification of the earlier generation's sin, displaying a profound spiritual awareness and commitment. The Talmud notes that the daughters of Tzelafchad were not only wise, but also learned women of great spiritual stature. They approached Moshe with a question of law concerning inheritance, and that demonstrates both their knowledge and their commitment to justice. The Midrash commends them for this resourcefulness, noting that they had leadership qualities and spiritual insight. Their initiative in bringing their case before Moshe and the community demonstrates their confidence and determination to uphold righteousness and justice. The Talmud as well interprets the daughters' actions as a demonstration of their deep understanding of Torah law and their commitment to upholding its principles. And their confidence to challenge the norm of the existing laws of inheritance showcases their dedication to living a life guided by Torah values. Their courage and initiative demonstrate a strong sense of faith in God's justice and a willingness to take risks for the sake of what is right. But now, please open up your heart in the deepest way. It was the daughters of Tzelafchad's love for the land of Israel and their soul's deep connection to it that was really the driving force behind their actions. The desire to inherit a portion of the land was because they understood the spiritual significance and the holiness of the land of Israel. But it's much, much deeper, so listen carefully. This wasn't about real estate. It wasn't about simply owning a portion of the land. Neither should their story be seen as a bold expression of feminism or a struggle for equality. Often today, the story of these women is championed and touted by those who have no true understanding of Torah, but they do have their own agenda. People will do that when they have an axe to grind, but that ignorant and shameless approach is doing these women an injustice. Their request emanated from something so deep, complete faith and trust in God's promise that gave them a profound understanding of the significance of the land of Israel. Their love for the land was not merely a desire for material inheritance, neither as possession nor as a symbol of status. That is a total misinterpretation. Their desire was rooted in a spiritual connection to the land and to the promises made to their ancestors. They understood that there's a covenantal relationship between the Jewish people and the land of Israel. They were motivated by a pure desire to fulfill their father's hopes and dreams so that the family would contribute to the spiritual fulfillment of the entire nation, embodying the concept of Eretz Israel as a place where the divine presence dwells. But now, open up your heart deeper still. Switch over with me for a moment, will you please, to the book of Judges. In the book of Judges, we learn about the prophetess Deborah, who served as a judge and prophetess in Israel. It was a role that required not only wisdom, but also courage. In chapter 4 of the book of Judges, we learn that she held court under the palm tree of Deborah, where the Israelites came to her for judgments. This setting is intended to exemplify her accessibility and her role as a leader who was ready to provide guidance and wisdom to the people. Deborah is praised as a courageous and strong leader. Her courage is evident in her interactions with Barak, whom she called to lead an army against the Canaanite forces led by Sisera. She delivered a divine command to Barak to muster 10,000 men from the tribes of Naphtali and Zvulun and lead them to Mount Tabor. Despite the fearsome reputation of Sisera's army, which boasted 900 iron chariots, Deborah confidently conveyed God's promise of victory and accompanied Barak into battle. Barak expressed reluctance to go into battle without Deborah, saying, "If you go with me, I will go, but if you don't go with me, I won't go." Deborah's response, "Certainly I will go with you," demonstrates her bravery and willingness to stand alongside her people in times of crisis. Deborah's strategic acumen is evident in her military planning. She orchestrated the gathering of Israelite forces at Mount Tabor, a location that offered strategic advantages against Sisera's chariots. So her leadership was not only spiritual, but also tactical, demonstrating her comprehensive capabilities as a leader. So Deborah's role in these events showcases her as a courageous and decisive leader. Her actions and decisions were crucial in the liberation of Israel from Canaanite oppression, and her willingness to stand by Barak and the people in battle highlights her bravery and commitment to her nation's well-being. Yet, open up your heart deeper than ever before, yet, all these qualities and accomplishments notwithstanding, the greatest and most amazing praise of all is recorded by Scripture in Judges chapter 5, verse 7. The verse reads, "The villagers ceased in Israel. They ceased until I, Deborah, arose. I arose as a mother in Israel." The title "A Mother in Israel" bestowed upon Deborah is a profound and significant praise, which both encompasses and surpasses her exceptional qualities of leadership, wisdom, compassion, and guidance. Deborah's designation as a mother in Israel signifies her role as a nurturing and protective leader who cared for the spiritual and physical well-being of the Israelites. Like a mother who provides love, support, and guidance to her children, Deborah exemplified these qualities in her leadership of the nation during a tumultuous period in Israel's history. This title, "A Mother in Israel," underscores Deborah's ability to inspire, unite, and lead the people with maternal care and wisdom. She wielded her authority not with harshness or coercion, but with compassion, understanding, and a deep sense of responsibility for the welfare of the community. Just as a mother has a unique connection to her children, understanding their needs and nurturing their growth, so too, Deborah possessed a deep understanding of the people and a profound commitment to their well-being. This emphasis on Deborah being a mother of Israel highlights a profound Torah value, the recognition of the nurturing and guiding roles that are embodied in motherhood. This praise acknowledges that true leadership encompasses not only authority and power, but also compassion, empathy, and the ability to nurture growth and development, essential qualities in fostering a strong, united, and morally upright community. So open up your heart in the very, very, very super deepest way. Deborah's praise of a mother in Israel can indeed be applied to the daughters of Tzelafchad as well, reflecting their deep concern for the future of their father's house and all their descendants in the land of Israel. Both Deborah and the daughters of Tzelafchad exemplify the qualities of nurturing, protection, and ensuring continuity. Just as Deborah provided leadership and guidance, these women demonstrated a proactive stance in securing their family's spiritual heritage. Their story serves as a powerful example of commitment to preserving their family's legacy and inheritance. By asserting their claim to their father's portion in the land of Israel, the daughters of Tzelafchad were not only torchbearers of their father's legacy, they exemplified the qualities of leadership, determination, and foresight that are characteristic of a mother in Israel. Like a mother who safeguards the well-being and future of her family, the daughters of Tzelafchad displayed a deep sense of responsibility and care for their father's house and descendants. This bold initiative of theirs and their unwavering faith in God's promises serve as a testament to their spiritual greatness and their enduring legacy as women of valor and integrity. And their concern mirrors the nurturing and protective qualities of motherhood. What a magnificent tikkun, rectification for the bleak, dark, and evil unraveling of the fabric of the family that was perpetrated by the idolatrous daughters of Moab and Midian at the opening of our portion. Ultimately, the story of the daughters of Tzelafchad teaches us profound lessons about faith, courage, and love for the land of Israel. These women serve as powerful role models for us today, inspiring us to cultivate a deep love for the land of Israel, to demonstrate courage and faith in the face of challenges, and to exhibit spiritual leadership in upholding the values of Torah and justice. The nation of Israel in this generation that's preparing to enter the land that we are learning about now in the book of Numbers, that generation is characterized by activism, whereas the generation of the desert was passive, experiencing life on a level transcending nature. For this generation of the land, the service of God is no longer passive. It's now going to be proactive. It's going to be about human initiative, about the yearning and desire to reach upwards, to act, to sanctify life by actively bringing Hashem's light, his presence, his Shekhinah into this world. All the generations are a progression. We're all part of the process leading to redemption. Our generation is also proactive, reaching upwards, even as it reaches downward, into the soil to settle the land, despite dangers, opposition, and difficult challenges. The courageous and righteous mothers in Israel of our generation, who selflessly risk it all for the sake of their children, for the continuity of their nation, who lovingly raise their children, not with imaginary, fake, woke values, but with true family values, with the love of the land and unwavering commitment to Hashem's will. They bring the daughters of Tzelafchad no shame. And like Deborah, they're filled with prophecy, filled with the spirit of Hashem, bringing the full measure of God's blessing into the world.
Interesting. And yeah, I was going to say, it is interesting that there's not as much mention of the mothers. I think a big part of it is the people writing down these traditions were focused more on the fathers. Again, it's not to say that the mothers weren't part of the story, but, and even then, I think another part of it could be, not that it justifies it, but that it could be for the sake of brevity, because, and I mean, it's something that you see in a bunch of different cultures, like even and I guess you could argue, oh, well, this is because of Christianity, but how much of this would be the case, like, versus how it was before that? Say, like if you're from Russia and your last name's Alexandrova, that means that you're a woman and your father is named Alexander. But if your last name is Alexandrov, it means that you're the son of Alexander. And so with that, you know, it's not that different than having this idea, you know, was it like, I'm trying to think, Gershom ben Moshe, because that's saying who his father is, but it's like, for all intents and purposes, is the closest thing to a last name that you'd have back then, just like you have in different cultures. So, I mean, I do think that at the end of the idea, like the last names, Banot Tzelafchad, that is their last name, Bat Tzelafchad, because that's the name that they all share in common. They're all daughters of Tzelafchad, so that would be their last name, because it's what identifies them beyond their, you know, first names. Any thoughts? I'm sure you've probably got some.
Yeah, two different areas. One of them on the inheritance angle. The other one is one that, you know, from my standpoint, is a little more disturbing. And I don't hear anybody mentioning that. And that is, you know, this incident kind of argues against infallibility, eternal infallibility for either God or the Torah. Because if they were originally eternally infallible when first given, there'd be no need to amend them. It would have had the proper rules of inheritance to cover all cases from the very beginning. So there never would have been an incidence of a problem or something. See what I'm saying?
Yeah, the narrative probably originates later and is retrojected into the past. Like this idea that it's a perfect text, you know, a perfect text that how come you have to, you know, how come you have to revise it? Well, and see, that's the thing, because the idea is it only gets seen as perfect after it's already been revised. And so you look back at it into the past before the revision, and it's like, okay, well, how is it perfect now, but then it's getting changed? It's because the idea of perfection was likely introduced around the same time that they had the changes introduced. At least that would be my hypothesis.
Oh no, that's a good rationale on it. It's just one of those where I don't really hear that mentioned a lot, in this one, and it's clearly a good interpretation. The other one is aspects of the inheritance. From my standpoint, it really needs to, it's addressing a lot of that preservation of genetics through time.
What do you mean?
And well, it's basically what gets preserved over time is your Y haplogroup. You can trace your male hair, a man can trace the male heritage back perfectly, father all the way back.
Yeah, but the only problem is if you don't have any sons.
Right, and that's the point of it. Is the point of the inheritance was to tie the physical property to that genetic line,
Or to
and
the
that's the question to do what to do to that point. And a legitimate argument, and that's one, is you go to the nearest Y chromosome, which would be the brothers. And in the female side, in what's preserved in the female line is the mitochondrial DNA, and that's shared by all women of a common descent. So it's kind of interchangeable between sister to sister to mother. It's much more free flow. It doesn't have the same continuity and preservation.
Well, yeah, but still, isn't there an issue of all your property basically just being, that's all just being taken up by, like for instance, what happens if there's like a conflict between you? I mean, at the end of the day, I think that it, at the end of the day, the kids of your brother are not going to carry on your legacy. Your daughters will, if all you have are daughters.
And you see, that's not as accurate. It's if you're a man, the odds are the sons of your brother are going to be closer to you than your daughters, because you're inserting a different, odds are a radically different preserved Y chromosome with the daughters taking over. It's like a hijacking of your inheritance rather than more of a lateral handoff to a brother.
I don't know. Personally, I think this is just my opinion. I feel like you're focusing a bit too much on the genetics and not enough on the sociological elements.
Well, I said I was focusing primarily on that one, and the main focus is the genetics first, and then how do the laws adjust to that for the sociological aspects? I'm 100% guilty as charged. I'm 100% going genetics first. That's that's what I see the primary concern was, and then trying to adjust it to the proper context to secondary tag.
Yeah, I mean, I personally just disagree with that, but, we don't have to agree. Let's see. Zero said, keep it in the Manasseh line. Can't have foreigners inherit. Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, the implication is that, the implication is that the other daughters will pass it on to their sons, and so by having them marry into the family, they're basically making it so that the property stays within the family. But I mean, at the end of the day, it's less about the actual genetics, and what's really focused on is the memory, the memory or the name. And like, I guess you could argue, oh well, the name is more than just a name, but like, at the end of the day, it literally refers to someone whose name is Ben or Bat X or Y.
I hear what you're saying, and to me, it still revolves primarily around the genetics, and what they're invoking there is very much what the Romans had in their sense of genius, where you had the creative force of that patrilineage, and that was what was driving everything forward. I see exactly the same sort of concepts in the Roman genius tradition.
You mean paterfamilias?
Yeah, well, it's again, it's the paterfamilias. It's the spiritual sense is the genius. That's stealing from the Greek as well. It's the impetus force.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I think it might just be that because I am Jewish, I have like a real aversion to anyone. And again, I'm not saying you. It's more so just the argument itself about anything being heavily focused on genetics beyond, basic like biology. But that's just my own discomfort.
Okay, I guess it's one of those I distilled back in the 90s. Society runs on 4 primary laws, and one of those is basically, who has the right to mate with who and produce offspring, and that's inherently a genetic thing.
Well, I mean, in the past, it was that people tried to marry as close as they could. Now people try to marry as far as they can. Well, unless you're in certain states, but.
Well, I'm not sure what you mean. I was going to say, the theory was always you tried to marry up.
Well, yeah, but in a lot of cases, people didn't have that opportunity. So the best option they had was to keep as much of their property they had in the family. That was their version of marrying up, or more so staying up.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's what the Rothschilds did with marrying first cousins and all.
No, I mean, it's something that it actually you can look throughout American history, that it's a lot more of a norm than people want to admit. It's not just rich people.
I hear what you're saying. I'd have to look at it to see how much of it was choice and how much of it was opportunity. How many times was primarily all that they had to choose from was family? Okay.
Either way, if you don't have a whole lot of stuff, you want to keep as much as you can. If you have plenty of wealth, then losing a little bit of it is going to impact you less than if you have very little and you lose a lot. Okay, so hold on, Zero. That's not true. It's not illegal. They just don't perform legal marriages for interfaith couples or for gay couples or for I'm trying to think what else. Also, if you're what was it? Even if you're what was it? If you're like, even if you've converted to Judaism, but you didn't convert to Orthodoxy, and you marry someone who was born Jewish, you can't get married in Israel because of the control that the ultra religious have over the courts. It's not illegal. You're not going to get arrested for marrying someone of a different faith. It's not that different to how before gay marriage was legalized in America. How there's people who in certain states that recognized it, people would go out of the country to places where they did acknowledge it, or alternatively with states that acknowledged it before it was federally legalized. Which it's wild to even think. I mean, it's like it's been, was it like 10 years now since it was legalized? It's kind of wild to think, but that at the end of the day, it's not that. Well, okay, so but no, see, that's the difference though. in Israel, people weren't getting arrested for being married to or for living with people who, it was solely an issue of recognition, legal recognition by the government. And so it was, it's a, I have an, basically there's a difference between something being between something not being legal versus something being illegal. They're two different things.
I would phrase that illegal versus government endorsed, but that's my way of looking at it.
Maybe not even endorsed, but acknowledged, because a government, it's kind of like a government, governments recognize religions, but that doesn't mean they endorse them. You see what I mean? I guess you could say they
I guess we're in the semantic territory. I think of endorse in the sense of signing off on the paperwork. So we're basically saying the same sort of thing.
I see endorses in giving credence to, or that you're promoting them in some way.
Well, and to me, you kind of are. If you're on the list of official government religions, that religion is in a different status than something that's not on that list.
But how much of that is endorsed versus that it meets a criteria?
Well, I'm just saying I'm drawing it entirely versus does the government include that on their roster or not? If they do, like I said, to me that qualifies as government, in the government lowest level of endorsement tag.
Interesting. All right, where is it?
Hi, I'm 𝐤𝐤𝐿, and welcome to the Creative Judaism channel. Creative Judaism
videos. What? You didn't make one this week? Well, that sucks.
Hi, I'm 𝐤𝐤𝐿, and welcome to the Creative Judaism channel. Creative Judaism.
Let's see.
This week's Parsha begins with Pinchas receiving praise and reward for his actions in last week's Parsha, when he killed Zimri, a prince of the Jewish people, and 𐤐𐤉, a Midianite woman with whom Zimri was sinning.
Yeah, again, I'm not saying it's not discrimination. I'm saying it's not illegal. Illegal would mean you're going to be thrown in jail for doing it. If you have a interfaith marriage certificate from another country, you're legally married. You're not going to get thrown in jail for having that. You're not going to get thrown in jail for being married. So, yeah, it is discrimination. I'm not saying that it's not, that they don't have the full legal rights, but there's a big difference between, and even then let me actually see. Let's see. Here, look at this. Interfaith marriage is not legally recognized in Israel, but marriages performed abroad or remotely can be registered by the government. Israel's religious laws prohibit interfaith marriages, same-sex marriages, and marriages for people who don't belong to a recognized religion or denomination. So see, that's another thing. If you're atheist, it's the same thing, because it's not about them being of another religion. It has to do with the problematic framework that that some of the courts were established. And look, I'm not saying it's not problematic, but but you need to present the whole picture. Otherwise, it present again. I'm not saying it's good, but it's not as bad as I feel like you're presenting it.
Now, out of curiosity, I'm always wondering about all the permutations and stuff. So they'll do Jewish and Jewish, Christian and Christian, and Muslim. That's the right interpretation?
Right, but they won't do atheist and atheist.
Okay. However, if you say you got it done in France, they would register the marriage from France.
Yeah.
So say if somebody got married to a toaster in a foreign country, they could register that with Israel, and that would be cool.
There's no country that lets you get married to a toaster.
I don't know that for certain. There are some really strange rules in really strange countries out there.
Hey, if someone wants to consummate their marriage with a plugged-in toaster oven, by the way, don't do that. But if they really
or what about a goat? Or what about a goat?
No.
Marriage to a goat, you know?
No. This is in ancient Greece.
Speaking of which, why, out of curiosity, why didn't they send the dude to Greece for the Olympic Games in the javelin? He seems like he'd be pretty good if he was able to run through two people with one throw.
Wait, I'm lost. What?
The guy, he got the reward for killing two people with one throw of his javelin.
Who is this?
That's in the Parsha.
Oh, I thought you were talking about Greece.
Well, I was, because I'm trying to figure out why they didn't send him as the Hebrew representative to the Olympic Games in Greece, in the javelin.
Oh, I don't know. But
I was trying for a joke, Ariel. It didn't
no,
work.
No. I thought it was a joke. I just didn't have a response.
Yeah, I fail sometimes. It's all good.
Wait a second. You hear who this guy's dad was?
And 𐤐𐤉𝐿, a Midianite woman with whom...
Oh, never mind. 𐤐𐤉𝐿 was the woman.
...whom Zimri was sinning. And Hashem quickly justified Pinchas' act, showing its extreme merit by rewarding him with the bris shalom and the bris kahuna. So what's the meaning of these two blessings, and why did Pinchas deserve them, specifically in response to his actions with 𐤐𐤉𝐿 and Zimri? And perhaps even more importantly, why was Pinchas' act of murder even considered heroic? It appears to be violent and rash, perhaps even worthy of criticism. So why then was it rewarded and so handsomely at that? So let's try to explain the deep principles behind this episode. The first gift awarded to Pinchas was the bris kahuna, an opportunity to join the rest of his family in performing the avodah, the service in the Mishkan, the tabernacle. So why was this gift so befitting? Because Kohanim, priests, served to foster the connection between both Hashem and this world and Hashem and the Jewish people. So through the avodah in the mikdash, through the service in the temple, the Kohanim connect the physical and spiritual, the Jewish people, to their source. And there are many layers of expression within this idea. The Maharal explains.
Again, not true. Just within Israel. It doesn't mean they can't be married in. It doesn't mean that they can't have their marriage recognized. It means that they can't legally get married in Israel. They can get married outside of Israel and then go there, and then it's recognized. I don't know how many times I have to explain this.
Now, could an Orthodox Jew marry a Reformed Jew in Israel, or are those considered different religions?
No, it would be considered the same, but obviously there's going to be issues.
I think some Orthodox would take issues with the two be considered the same religion, but I understand your point. The government recognizes them as the same.
And again, it's not illegal. It's not legal, which means it's not legally recognized. You're not going to be thrown in jail. You're not going to be fined. Like, Zero, why do you keep insisting on this? Yeah, you can't marry someone who's of another faith in Israel. That doesn't mean you can't be married to someone of another faith in Israel. Big difference.
Now, what about if I, who's a total non-minister, performed a non-sanctioned wedding between, a Muslim and a Jew in Israel? Would that be illegal to do? I mean, it wouldn't be recognized, but would that just be, some sort of play stunt as far as?
Yeah, I can't imagine that, especially, you really think they would throw someone in jail over that?
Well, if it was going to cause a riot or something, I could have pictured that. But, again, just normal sorts of things now. Yeah, I suppose they might get upset if I was wearing, say, a pig costume when I did it.
See, again, Zero, you're wrong on this. Residents of Israel are prohibited from marrying another faith. That's not true. They're not. Their marriages to someone of another faith, if the marriage happens in Israel. That's why people go to other countries to get married, and then they return to live in Israel. Like, dude, I really feel like you're not listening to what I'm saying.
That 7 is the number of the natural. Therefore, all physical and natural components of this world are built off 7s. 7 days in the week, 7 notes in the musical scale, 7 colors in the spectrum of light. And 8 represents going beyond the natural, lemala min hateva, which is why bris milah is done on the 8th day. We take the most physical and potentially animalistic organ and use it to transcend, which is what circumcision is all about. And this is why the miracle of Hanukkah lasted 8 days, and why it came through shemen, oil, which has the same shorish, the same root as shmona, the number 8. It's therefore no surprise that the gematria, the numerical value.
Okay, also, wait, where is this? What website? Where did it say prohibited? Oh, Israel's religious laws prohibit interfaith marriages. That doesn't mean that I don't know how to explain it. Marriages in Israel can only take place under the auspices of the couple's religious community in Israel. Like, here, I'll pull up a video on this. It's a contentious issue. I have an issue with it, but, like, dude, I have an issue with it being misrepresented as well.
Now, just to make sure, there aren't any, like, armed stormtroopers walking around checking people's, marriage certificates or breaking into their houses just to make sure that everything's on the up and up, right?
Wait, I'm confused. So, Zara, you did say it is illegal, or you didn't? Oh, I didn't say be married, but to marry. Okay, so it's a semantics thing. Again, it's not illegal. It's not like, basically like okay, here, I mean, like, theoretically, okay, sure. Is it illegal to marry a car? Okay, so that just is not legally. What would be something that, let's see. Not legal versus illegal. Legal means something is in accordance with the law, while illegal means something is not. Illegal. Okay, that's oversimplified. Yeah. Not legal is a double net. Wait, not illegal. No. Not illegal. Wait, no. Not legal versus illegal. Not legal versus illegal, not legal versus legal. Anyway.
Some of what you're dealing with hits in what I learned as the prescribed versus proscribed, where in the one, you have only one legitimate way of doing things. Everything else is banned and can bring, repercussions, negative repercussions that follow. Mm-hmm. In the other way, you have one recommended course, but other ways are also allowed.
Yeah. Okay. So, I mean, you say it's not semantics, but the thing is that, like, from a linguistic standpoint, it is semantic. That the difference between whether it's the difference between being married or to marry, or between something being illegal, meaning that you're breaking the law, versus something being not legal or not being recognized. Big difference. Like for instance, trying to think of an example. Okay, here's an example. It's no, actually, I don't have a good example right now. Let's just continue this and I'll pull up something.
Value of Kohen is 75. The number directly between 70 and 80, 7 and 8. The Kohen's role is to connect the higher and lower, the spiritual and physical, the infinite and finite. And this is done specifically in the base Hamikdash, or the Mishkan, the place of connect. The root as Shemona, the number 8. It's therefore no surprise that the gematria, the numerical value of Kohen, is 75. The number directly between 70 and 80, 7 and 8. The Kohen's role is to connect the higher and lower, the spiritual and physical, the infinite and finite. And this is done specifically in the base Hamikdash, or the Mishkan, the place of connection between the spiritual and physical, between Hashem and this world. And by killing Zimri and putting a stop to the rampant sin amongst Klal Yisrael, Pinchas both prevented further sin and atoned for their past sins, thereby putting an end to the Magifah, the plague. And this is the exact job of the Kohen, to help atone for sin and maintain the Jewish people's connection with Hashem. So in doing so, Pinchas earned his right to be a Kohen. Kahuna was not an arbitrary gift. It was the positive consequence of the person Pinchas chose to become, a zealot for Hashem. And in addition to the bris kahuna, Pinchas was granted the bris shalom. Simply translated, the word shalom means peace. But the deeper understanding and translation of
the full blessing. Being married is a state, to marry is an act. The act is a... Okay, do you actually know that for a fact? If you try to get married, will you get thrown in jail? Or will it just not be recognized? If you can tell me that you'll be thrown in jail, then I'll agree that it's illegal.
Shalom is harmony and balance. Shalom is not when two parties sit next to each other without hurting one another. True shalom is when different parties, perhaps even contradictory parties, are able to interconnect, harmonize, and create something beyond the sum of their parts. And this is exactly what Pinchas achieved. He created a state of harmony within Klal Yisrael. Beforehand, there was absolute chaos and dysfunction. Klal Yisrael was mired in sin. And Zimri was leading them towards greater and greater levels of chaos and dysfunction. Pinchas not only reinstated equilibrium, resetting the balance, but created a stronger, deeper state of connection and oneness, both amongst the members of Klal Yisrael and between Klal Yisrael and Hashem. He was the true embodiment of Shalom. The Bris Shalom was a perfect description of what Pinchas had.
I have a huge issue with saying this guy who's responsible for all this violence was the embodiment of Shalom, of peace. I don't know, it's like, oh, they were mired in chaos before, but now everything's good. Honestly, it just sounds like a lot of doublespeak that fascists would use. And again, I'm not saying that the people who wrote the Torah were fascists. I think that in a lot of cases, I suspect there's more symbolism going on here than, meets the eye at first. And I can't help but this whole idea of the kind of this connection of divine bloodlust, it's something that I really don't like it. But I can't help but notice you have this plenty in Greek traditions. I mean, just look at the I think the perfect example of this was it Euripides Bacchae? Or Eurydice Bacchae? I forget. You know what I'm talking about? The one with Pentheus.
If you're talking me, I'm somewhat familiar, at least.
Yeah, basically you have this these women followers of Dionysus who they're out worshiping him in the groves, and then I think they discover Pentheus, and they see that he's dressed up as a woman, and they realize that he's not actually, and so they tear him limb from limb, and his mother in the frenzy thinking that he's a lion, tears off his head and like cradles it in her arms. And as she's going down from the mountain to the city, she recognizes that that the head she's carrying is actually her son's. So like, there's like, you know, on one hand you could say, oh well, this story's just as bad as that one, or you could say there's something else going on here and it's symbolic. You see what I mean? And I think the problem is people have lost the plot and they take all this shit hyper literally, and then they use it to you know, like they basically these things are that you could look at as guiding lessons. People take hyper literally, and because of that, they end up actually completely missing a good bulk of the message. Not to say they don't come up with their own messages, but it's kind of like the difference between the original message versus trying to derive something out where it maybe didn't previously exist.
Well, isn't the proper answer then just to everybody refer to the Orphic Vox? Okay.
Yeah, just whatever your inner self tells you, man. Like, no, there's such a thing as studying language. You can't just make things mean what you want it to because you say it does. I mean, there's cases where, like, sure, if it's like a documented thing, but anyway, let me see. Illegal doesn't mean jail time necessarily. It means illegal rights. Again, there is a difference between illegal and not recognized, or like. See, the thing is, how do I explain it?
There's also the difference between rights and privileges. A lot of what people refer to as rights are technically privileges. It's like driving isn't a right, it's a privilege. Hey.
Yeah, I mean, like, technically a right would, like, it's not a legal right if it's, or no, sorry, I'm getting mixed up. Never mind. Anyway, let's continue.
Achieved. And this is the incredible story of Pinchas. He was a zealot, a leader, and an enforcer of truth. He stood up for the truth even when no one stood with him, even when his reputation and life itself was on the line. May we be inspired to always strive for the higher truth, to stand up for what we know is right, and to consistently create both external and internal shalom.
Go into the chapel and we're gonna get married. Go into the chapel and we're gonna get married.
Getting engaged is the easy part, but getting married in Israel isn't so simple for everybody.
We got married about a year ago in September 2000. Not a year ago, 2 years ago. Sorry.
Israel is a democratic state, but the government enforces religious law on marriage and divorce. Today, any Jew living in Israel who wants to get married has to do so through the Orthodox-run chief rabbinate.
To get married through the rabbinate, you have to prove that you're Jewish. Have an Orthodox rabbi officiate your nuptials and make sure the wedding itself aligns with the practices of Orthodox Judaism. Meaning, even if you aren't Orthodox or religious, you're required to abide by Orthodox rules. But a third of the Israeli couples that got married in 2018 didn't do it through the rabbinate. Many say it's because they were putting up a fight.
We're both recognized as Jews in Israel. There's no problem. It was a choice.
A small act of protest.
The idea that in this country you can only get married through a religious body is kind of off-putting.
The message of the rabbinate is that there's only one way. And if you don't do it our way, then you're not really Jewish.
But not all couples are choosing to avoid the rabbinate because of ideological reasons. Some just really don't have the option. An estimated 1 in 10 marriages are mixed.
I'm from Germany.
I'm from Israel.
And we're getting married.
And if you're in a mixed religion marriage or aren't considered Jewish according to the state, you can't legally get married in the state of Israel to another Jewish person.
We knew that there will be consequences of the fact that Charlotte is not Jewish and we cannot get married in a religious way.
Charlotte began to try to convert to Judaism to be able to get married by the rabbinate in Israel.
You have to apply to under the Prime Minister's office, and then, like a state affair, you apply and to submit letters of recommendation.
Today, there is an option for couples who don't want to get married through the rabbinate. They can get married abroad and then come back to Israel and register their civil marriage with the government.
I tried to convert for almost a year now. It's been since October. And it's just not possible, so we have to go to Cyprus.
But now there is a whole new alternative in Israel, domestic union cards.
It's a new status relationship which give you same rights as married couple. You are able to get fertility treatments, mortgage, tax benefits, pension, social security benefits. We gave the power back to the people.
Statistics show that 68% of the Israeli Jewish public favors.
What's that you're talking about? So they don't have legal rights, dude. Don't talk about shit that you don't know. Things are getting better. Like it's not perfect, but like, dude, look, America only 10 years ago, there were people who couldn't get married because of who they love. So, like, yeah, things aren't perfect. I've never claimed they were perfect, but you're saying it's illegal that people aren't getting these benefits. That's not true. It's simply like it's literally a loophole. It's the fact that the religious people have such a grip on the courts that that they like. It's just the courts. It's just the marriage courts. That's it. But the government actually does recognize marriages or these civil unions outside of the context of the. You understand? It's like. Imagine saying that, okay, everybody has to go in through the store, but technically you can go in through the window. And if you go in through the window, you don't have to worry about the door people not letting you in. Dude, like, what's your bone to pick? Because you're just wrong in this case. Like, you're like, yeah, obviously it puts a barrier on people who don't have the resources to go out of the state of Israel to get married, or for people, but like you're straight up saying that. Also, like, dude, that's such bullshit, because you could literally have no Jewish blood and you could convert to Judaism. It's not about genetics. It's literally about religion. It doesn't matter if you're fully Jewish. If you don't have a Orthodox Jewish wedding in Israel, it's not recognized. How many ways do I have to explain this to you?
There's a law that would allow freedom of choice in marriage. But for some, doing so would rid Israel of its Jewish identity.
מי שמדבר על מציאות של שינוי, הוא לא חשב במידה מספקת, אבל זה חוסר אחריות משווע לגבי קיומו ועתידו של עם ישראל.
In Israel, marriage has become more than just a union. It's become a question of freedom of choice and a window into the identity struggles the country faces when it comes to separating state and religion.
You know, that brings up a very important point, and that should be, when does personal preference overrule, a nation's laws? Because I fully support a nation's right for self-determination, but once the country determines the laws, it's up to everybody within the country to basically live within that or work to change the laws. And if you don't like the laws as they now exist, well, you can always go elsewhere, sort of thing. That's sort of my view on it. And I don't have a lot of sympathy for these people who start pitching a fit just because the law doesn't fit what they think it should at any given moment. Tag.
Yeah, my issue is just like at the end of the day, I'm with Zero on that. It's a bullshit law, but like he's going so far as to say like, oh, it's so horrible, but like, dude, there's loopholes. People are able to get the legal rights that normally they wouldn't. It's literally, basically, it would be the equivalent of if America didn't pass gay marriage, but basically gave gay people the equal rights, and it was just not called a marriage because the conservatives would pitch a hissy fit. If
Many states have done that before.
Yeah, like
that was. I was going to say that was an existing thing, and like I said, I fully support a country's right to have dumbass laws if they want. They have to live by them, and that's sort of the way it works. Is I want to be able to live by my own dumbass rules as long as I'm not enforcing them on somebody else. And the same thing should go for a country. The country should have their dumbass rules as long as they're not trying to force other countries to live by that. That's what makes sense to me, Tag.
Mm-hmm. Let's see. See what I can find. Interesting.
First tonight to Israel.
Now listen to this. Why would a far-right Israeli group want to end the intermarriage of Jews and Arabs if it's not something that, like, and again, I know you're saying that, you know, like, oh, well, you know, it's just in Israel, but like, still, at the end of the day, I think that it's kind of like, obviously, it does discriminate against people who don't have the means to just, you know, leave the country and get married. But like, I really feel like you're ignoring the fact that things aren't as cut and dry as it really seems like you're presenting it.
Israel, where the age-old act of falling in love can generate more abuse than good wishes. Earlier this year, as the destruction of Gaza unfolded, tensions between Arabs and Jews were skyrocketing. But one young couple swam against the tide of hatred. One Jewish, one Arab. They proudly announced their marriage, little expecting the storm that would soon gather around them. Amos Roberts reports on the unlucky couple.
A stretch limousine, lots of lace and tulle, tambourines. The wedding of Mahmoud Mansour and Moral Malka had all the usual Middle Eastern trappings. Plus something the couple hadn't originally bargained on.
זאת הייתה אמורה להיות חתונה פרטית של בני הזוג, אבל החתונה הזאת מסעירה את המדינה כבר שבוע ימים. בשל כך היא יהודייה והוא ערבי, אז יש כאלה שמתנגדים לקיומה של החתונה הזאת. נמצאים כבר שעות רבות כאן מאות אנשים שמתנגדים לקיומה של החתונה הזאת מהימין הקיצוני.
Inside the reception centre, friends and family celebrated the wedding. Outside, there was mourning. Their prayers were confronting and personal. They called on Moral to leave her husband. Masterminding the protests was Bentzi Gopstein. He's the leader of Lehava, a far-right group opposed to Jewish assimilation that tries to prevent intermarriage, especially with Palestinians.
מדינה יהודית, באנו לפה בשביל להקים מדינה יהודית, ואם הם עושים משהו שלא טוב, זכותנו המלאה לעמוד בצד ולצעוק נגד זה.
Can you see how some people, how the couple might have found that upsetting or offensive even?
Of course, but this is my work.
Two people who fall in love, they have every right to choose whether they like to be together or not.
There was also a counter-demonstration at the wedding.
We believe in free love, and we believe in the choice they have to be together, and especially against the Lehava people who stands over there.
Orthodox Jews believe that marriage to anyone who isn't Jewish is forbidden by Scripture, but there's an obvious and ugly racial dimension here.
השונאים האלה, אנשי השנאה, מה שאני קוראת להם אגב, גם במחקר שלי, הם לא מעלים על דעתם שבעצם יש כאן מפגשים אנושיים. אין דבר כזה אנושי. זה לא קיים הדבר הזה.
Zamira Ron David is researching mixed marriages for a PhD at Ben-Gurion University.
הבחירה של לחלוק את חיי, זאת השאלה. האם אני יכול במקום כזה עוין לחלוק את חיי את מישהו שכביכול נחשב לאויב שלי?
Mahmoud and Moral live in Yaffo, next to Tel Aviv, famous for its mix of Jews and Palestinians. They told the media the wedding was a chance to share their love story with friends and family. It was not to make a political statement.
אנחנו ביחד 5 שנים. אני אוהבת אותו כמו שהוא, הוא בשבילי בן אדם. אין דת או לאום לאהבה. ואנחנו מאושרים וכיף לנו.
Before the wedding, Mahmoud went to court to try to have the protest banned. He got an injunction preventing Lehava from coming within 200 meters of the reception hall. Mahmoud and Moral still can't work out why their wedding caused so much commotion. After all, mixed marriages might be rare, but they're not unique.
יש עשרות ביפו, יש במדינה הרבה. יהודים מתחתנים עם מישהו מקנדה, יהודים מתחתנים עם נוצריה, אף אחד לא עזר מזה בערבה.
Bentzi Gopstein says if Arabs and Jews marry, they should do it discreetly, not act as though it's normal.
וזה מתחיל להיכנס למיינסטרים, כאילו להיות שכולה לגיטימי, וזה הבעיה. אנחנו לא רוצים שזה יהיה לגיטימי. אם מישהו עושה את זה, שיעשה את זה בשקט, לא יעשה את זה מסיבות בראשון לציון.
Tel Aviv is Israel's most laid-back and cosmopolitan city. Tonight, Lehava is visiting to try and change that. I'm supposed to meet Bentzi outside this nightclub. But just up the road, he's come under attack. Militant opponents of Lehava have ambushed its bus, smashing a window. Now, police are struggling to separate the two sides. Most of the Lehava activists are young men from Jerusalem or Jewish settlements in the occupied territories. They worship Bentzi and his macho brand of Judaism.
חברים, כל הכבוד לכם. אני מקווה שהיו פה כמה שהצליחו להפציץ לכמה שם. אנחנו לא נוצרים, אנחנו לא מגישים את הלחי השנייה.
The police have escorted the Lehava bus to the port area in Tel Aviv, where they can spread their message without creating a riot.
לילה טוב לכל יהודים בתל אביב. לזכור, בת של מלך יוצאת רק עם בן של מלך.
Bentzi accuses Arab men of seeking out Jewish women for political as well as romantic reasons.
הבעיה אצל הערבים שהם מתייחסים לזה גם בתור מלחמה. חלק מהמאבק שלהם, סליחה על הביטוי, זה לדפוק את היהודיות, זה לדפוק את היהודים, להשפיל אותנו.
Although this is 𝐤𝐉𝐻's first visit to Tel Aviv, it hits the streets most weeks in Jerusalem to preach segregation and to hunt down mixed couples, as seen in this news report.
כך זה נראה ביום חמישי האחרון, אבל שינון מתקבלת הודעה על שתי צעירות יהודיות שמבלות עם גברים ערבים. 𝐤𝐉𝐻 goes out of its way to provoke. It's easy to see how this could lead to violence. Here they're handing out stickers warning Arab men to stay away from Jewish women at an Arabic restaurant. Tel Aviv might be famously tolerant, but it seems that 𝐤𝐉𝐻 is not without its supporters here.
כן, תיגע. הוא נגע לי בציצים, מורי. אתה נגעת לה בציצים. Listen to me. I can speak. We can't marry with Arabs because it's not okay. We don't mix. We are not chocolate. We don't mix.
עם ישראל. עבודת קודש אתם עושים.
So what does the sticker say?
They said the girls of Israel only to the Israeli, not to the Arab.
Do you have any daughters?
Yeah.
And how would you feel if they married an Arab?
Are you crazy? Bye.
רגע, את לא באה לטיול? אוקיי.
בוקר טוב.
Some 𝐤𝐉𝐻 activists clearly believe you're never too young to receive their message. In June, they targeted this school in the southern city of Beersheba.
בוקר טוב, מה נשמע?
Hagar Primary School is extremely unusual in Israel. It has a mix of Jewish and Arab pupils, and it teaches them about both cultures.
I just got here one morning at 7:30 and I saw that all the yard is full with the stickers. They were white and it was written that Jews and Arabs should not be in any connection and that an Arab shouldn't touch a Jew. It was all over the place. It was
Principal Orit Freiberg was so anxious to get rid of the stickers, she kept only a few before calling the police.
And how did you feel seeing this?
It was like someone got into my house and wrote bad things about me. It felt really, really bad.
I don't do it. I don't know who do it.
They're 𝐤𝐉𝐻 stickers though.
Yeah, I give stickers to people. I don't know where they put them and who put it. But I don't cry when I hear it.
Because you disapprove of a school like this?
Of course.
Local rabbi Yehuda Harel says the police suspected he was involved in vandalizing the school.
שאלו אותי, הגיעו אליי כמה טלפונים וניסו לחקור אותי, משכו אותי כדי לשמוע אם אני כן עשיתי את זה או לא עשיתי את זה. ולכל אחד ואחד אמרתי, זה לא הדרך, זה לא נכון, דרך של הסברה היא נכונה, דרך של פריצה ולעבור איזשהו, להיכנס לשטח של מישהו אחר, אני חושב שזה מוגזם.
But Rabbi Harel is a great supporter of 𝐤𝐉𝐻.
לא שונא ערבים. אני לא שונא ערבים. יש לי ערבים חברים טובים מאוד. הם פשוט... אבל אני אוהב את הערבים שהם יודעים את המקום שלהם. שהם יודעים מה התכלית שלהם. שהם יודעים שיהודים זה גוף שאסור להתקרב אליו. דוגמה לקחת ולגעת ולהסתכל על יהודייה, זה לפגוע בגוף הזה. וברגע שפוגעים בגוף הזה, אני אישית קורא לעצמי קיצוני, ימיני, הכי ימיני שיכול להיות. אני גזען בדבר הזה. כן.
The rabbi has personal reasons for his strong feelings.
זה שיר למעלות שאנחנו שרים.
Just a few days ago, his youngest daughter married a Jewish man.
אז ששרתי את השיר הזה בחופה, היו לו הרבה כוונות.
But he also has an older daughter, Chen, who lives with a Bedouin man, and they have 5 children together. She came to her sister's wedding.
והנה עכשיו, איזה נסיכה. בעזרת השם גם היא תחווה חוויה של חתונה יהודית, ככה עם איש יהודי.
Bensi believes that most marriages to Arabs end in tragedy, that they treat their wives badly. Is this something that your daughter has experienced?
לצערי זה לא המקרה של הבת שלי. הבת שלי מקבלת יחס טוב. שהוא לא מכה, והוא לא מרביץ, והוא לא, ואפילו לא מרים את הקול.
Regrettably, excuse
חבל שזה לא קורה ככה, כי אם זה היה קורה ככה, זה הייתה חוזרת. במהירה הייתה חוזרת.
Today, pupils from the Hagar school are being taken to a nature reserve to learn about the Jewish New Year. Next week, the school will teach them about the Islamic holiday of Eid al-Adha. It's all too rare in Israel for Jewish and Arab children to study each other's cultures.
כשהקמנו בכיתה א', אז אני הייתי כאילו ישנה, אני כבר מהגן, פתאום זה הקשר נהיה חזק יותר וחזק יותר, ובסוף אנחנו חברות נורא טובות.
זה הראשונה שלך? כן.
הייתה החברה הכי מקסימה בעולם, ואני הכרתי אותה ושיחקנו ביחד, וכשהיא רצתה עזרה, אני עזרתי לה, וכשאני הצטרכתי עזרה, גם היא עזרה.
How would you feel if they decided to marry? If your Jewish children decided to marry an Arab?
I don't have any problem.
No problem? And
For
for
me,
you?
no.
If your children
We'll see
decided...
if they're real in love, they could fight for it.
Bensi Gopstein from 𝐤𝐤𝐍𝐿 is horrified by the prospect of Jewish and Arab school friends falling in love. He remembers what Moral's husband, Mahmoud, told an Israeli newspaper before their wedding.
אני למדתי ביחד בבית ספר עם יהודיות, ואתם לא יכולים להגיד לי שאני יכול לשחק איתם בכיתה, שאני יכול ללמוד איתם בכיתה, שאנחנו יכולים לעשות הכל, אבל ברגע שאני מתאהב להגיד לי סטופ.
About 20% of Israel's population is Arab. It sounds as though your vision of Israel is that this 20% should be sealed off from the other 80%.
Maybe they need to go to Australia. We want here just people that think this is Jewish state. If someone thinks this is not a Jewish state, maybe you can take him to Australia or United States, I don't care.
Moral and Mahmoud don't want to speak to the media anymore. They'd like to put their unfortunate encounter with 𝐤𝐤𝐍𝐿 behind them.
שהם לא מעניינים, הם אנשים גזענים, שאין להם מקום במדינה כזאת, הם מסוכנים למדינה הזאת בכלל. הם כמו שלא אוהבים את הערבים, הם גם לא אוהבים יהודים חילונים, אלה לא אוהבים את עצמם. היה לנו חתונה שלא חלמנו עליה.
I think that story's made me more depressed about prospects for the region than just about anything else I've seen.
This is Leah and Tyre. They met about 5 years ago, but because his birth certificate says he's Muslim, even though he doesn't practice, and Leah says she's Jewish, they are not allowed to get married in Israel.
a lot of people have asked us kind of like about our families, and if that was an issue, we couldn't. Legally, we couldn't. I would have had to convert to Islam, or he would have had to convert to Judaism, which I didn't want him to have to do.
The State of Israel requires all of its citizens to marry in accordance with their religious community, Jews with Jews, Muslims with Muslims, and so on.
It works good. The religion is part of the identity of the state. We have religious courts for every religious community. The Sharia law is part of the Israeli law.
For couples like Leah and Thayer, the criticism isn't that but that there's no option to marry outside of your religion. But the issue of intermarriage runs deep in the Jewish tradition, since only the child of a Jewish mother will be Jewish.
The Jewish nation is disappearing. Why? Why? The only answer is the intermarriage. Marrying non-Jewish girl means you destroy the Jewish nation. I mean, the children are not Jewish. Nothing can be done.
Israel's former education minister even called intermarriage among U.S. Jews like a second Holocaust. And although most Israelis wouldn't go that far, there is wide support for the religious laws.
If we will have a national law in cases of personal status issues, it will make harmful for everyone. Why? Because there will be a tension between my life as a Muslim and the law of the state.
One study from the religious freedom organization Hiddush shows 68% of the adult Jewish population in Israel supports the option for a civil marriage, and yet, even on the streets of Tel Aviv, the liberal hub of Israel, marrying within the Jewish religion matters.
Of course, for me, it's really important. But for example, my biggest boy is now with a non-Jewish girl in France, and I think they will be married.
And how do you feel about that?
Quite sad.
I'm a Muslim, religious, and I'm against any Muslim marrying outside the religion. It's forbidden in our religion.
Why not? It's only human being. It doesn't differ. Do we are the same? All look the same.
He's being ridiculous. Really? There's no way. Intermarriage is forbidden.
In spite of all the support from their family and closest friends, Leah and Thayer felt this, and they decided to move to the U.S.
We got married first time in Cyprus, and then we came and did like a sort of a ceremony. Like even friends, like not really close friends, would still have like a hint of like, this is not okay.
In terms of society and bureaucracy and all of these things and stigmas, we definitely faced challenges. For me, it was really hard, and the longer I stayed, the more I felt like for us to have kids, I could not imagine raising them in Israel.
While the majority of Jews in Israel stand united behind the idea of their country being a home for all Jews, the definition of what Jewish identity is differs widely.
There is no liberal way to define Jewish. All those liberals, the conservatives and reforms, it's nothing. Absolutely nothing.
Other more secular Jews tend to say being Jewish is mainly a matter of culture, and that Israel cannot truly call itself a democracy if it doesn't ensure basic rights, like marriage, to its citizens.
We can really envision a Jewish and democratic state, a Jewish state in which we speak Hebrew, in which the holidays, the national holidays are Jewish, in which the state bodies serve kosher, but we don't think that the state should be in the business of interpreting or imposing or coercing religion on its individual citizens.
For now, many Israelis get married abroad. The state will recognize their certificate, but unless the mother is Jewish, the right kind of Jewish accepted by the religious courts, their children won't be accepted by the rabbinate. Even if the state of Israel accepts them, the religious courts will not. Does that mean they aren't Jewish? Bianca Zanini, I-24 News.
It's interesting how it ties to this whole story, though, because, you know, of just how relevant it is to the Parsha.
Yeah, that brings up the point of how do you make both groups happy under the same government? because
Wait, which groups? Jews and Muslims, or religious and non-religious?
well, the radical right, the radical conservative Jews there, and then the free lovers who basically say, well, there shouldn't be any rules.
Well, they're not saying there shouldn't be any rules. They're just saying that the government shouldn't dictate. Like, at the end of the day, it's one thing for a rabbi to say, I'm not going to officiate your marriage because because they don't agree with that. But it's another thing for the government to say that.
Well, and there are some of those free lovers who sit there and say that rabbi has no right to not officiate a wedding. They think they should be able to get the government to force that rabbi to officiate their wedding. That's how far gone some on the extreme are on the free love side. And that's where I'm coming from. It's a question of, it's like they don't want to live by rules that aren't rules they agree with. They don't like the idea that there's a government that lays down rules that everybody has to live by, regardless of whether people like them or not.
No, but see, that's the thing. Nobody in Israel, except for the religious people, like these laws, because it doesn't just disparage people who are having intermarriages. It's also disparaging people who just for whatever reason don't want basically, if I wanted to have a wedding, I was married to someone Jewish in Israel, it would have to be an Orthodox wedding. Otherwise, it wouldn't be legally recognized. It has nothing.
I understand what you're saying. You're making a tree argument against my forest. I'm saying that, any sort of arbitrary rule, there's going to be a free lover that finds objection to it.
Yeah,
they're going to find objection. They'll find objection to not being able to marry a goat. That's how far gone some of them are. Again, you know about NAMBLA.
Yeah, but nobody is seriously arguing, or rather, nobody serious is arguing for that.
That's not a solid argument, and you know it. 50 years ago, nobody seriously was arguing for gay marriage.
Are you sure?
Is it over to... I would be willing to bet, 50? Well, let's go 60 years ago. 60 years ago, there were probably about as many people arguing seriously for gay marriage as there are people arguing for NAMBLA now. If anything, I'd give the nod towards NAMBLA these days versus 60 years ago gay marriage.
What I'm talking about is, are there any serious academics or people of influence who are promoting that? Or is it just something that a bunch of perverts are trying to normalize?
They have, one person's pervert is another person's fetish. And yeah, there's a lot of scholarly papers that deal with sexuality and sexual orientation and things like that. Just to serve, you can find scholarly papers on just about anything.
But I know, but just because someone wrote a paper, that's not the same thing as is there actually a push by what I'm saying is there any serious politician who's who promotes NAMBLA, for instance?
Well, I believe back in the day, Barney Frank was at the very least sympathetic towards them. I've really disconnected from anything resembling politics over the last 4 to 5 years here, because as you know, I consider all of them corrupt.
Yeah,
the whole DC enterprise right now is broken beyond repair, in my opinion.
Look, all I'm saying is there's something inherently flawed with a system that tells you have to get married according to this religious tradition, otherwise you can't get married here.
And why don't you look at what I'm trying to say? I'm trying to say there are people out there who are objecting to a system that has rules that tells them to do anything they don't want to do.
Yes, but there's no moral argument for banning intermarriage or for banning people the ability to get married according to how they want. Like I'm not
define moral there. From the Orthodox Jewish standpoint, they have all the moral authority they need to do that.
But this is what I'm trying to explain to you. Israel is not technically a theocracy, but the religious, only because of basically a deal with the devil that the government made originally in order to get the religious on their side. They basically granted them.
Again, I'm sympathetic. That's not dissimilar to the deal with the devil that had to be made in 1776 and 1789 as far as getting the slave states on board with the United States. Sometimes you got to make the deal with the devil and then deal with the horrific repercussions later. What I'm trying to say is each country is allowed to set their rules. And
okay, who's setting those rules?
The country decides how the rules set amongst the people. Sometimes you have a dictatorship that seizes power, and they get to set the rules. It's up to the country. If the country doesn't like the dictator, get rid of the dictator. Yeah, that's when you're in the course of human events period, like Jefferson talks about.
I just have so many issues with that argument personally.
Well, I'm going from fundamentals. You either have a government or you don't. If you have a government, they're going to have rules. Those rules, some people aren't going to like. If enough people don't like those rules and think the government isn't working, then you're at the one in the course of human events and you get a new government. Otherwise, you try to work with the government to adjust the rules to be more to the likings of the people.
And that's what they're doing.
Well, part of those people are those radically right religious people. They deserve it's like people say they don't deserve any say in things. Because they're religiously conservative, what they want shouldn't count.
No, they should have the right to their tradition, but they shouldn't have the right to stop other people from having as long as they're not harming anyone. It goes down to what you consider harm. The religious people consider it harm because they're like, oh well, this is destroying our community. But the fact is that you need to balance the rights of the individual with the rights of the community.
Yeah, and I hate to say it, but this is where things like the ghetto make sense, where different communities can have their neighborhoods, where they can have their internal sets of rules that if you don't like it, you don't have to go there. You can go live in a different ghetto, a different community with a different set of rules.
Except that if you're pushed out of your community, what community do you join?
That's the choice you have to make as an individual. Is it worth staying in that community and bowing to what they want? Or are you willing to say, F it, I'll live with the consequences of being cut off? That's what happens to Jehovah's Witnesses when they leave. That's what happens to Mormons when they leave. When they leave their religion, they literally are supposed to be cut off entirely. No contact, no job, no discussion. They are dead to those people.
Okay, but what's your issue with what I'm saying? I mean, I'm literally saying that right now, in Israel, like I was explaining to Zero, that the government isn't so strict. They basically have this thing called marriage that they're protecting, but at the end of the day, the whole idea of civil unions or even marriages in other countries, they're not saying people can't get married elsewhere and have their marriage recognized. It's literally just a deal that, a second deal that they had to make with the religious in order to come to a peaceable agreement.
I understand. To me, you're arguing specifics. You're arguing the trees. To me, marriage should simply be the marriage should be the religious ceremony. Whatever ceremony you want to have that commemorates it. And then you have this is the civil union aspect, which is what you file the paperwork for with the government. Those are entirely different.
But you do have the problem. What happens if well, I mean, like, what happens if you're not? Well, I guess technically, if you're not religious, then you just get a civil union, maybe.
Yeah. No. Like I said, my solution is two-stage. You got the ceremony and the religious aspect, and then you have the legal aspect. And you can marry them if you want. You can separate them if you want. Again, this is how I think it should work. It virtually doesn't anywhere in the world, as far as I know.
Except apparently Israel.
Well, what I'm trying to say here is I'm trying to boil it down to a much larger problem, and that's the idea of people following rules. Because I think one of the big issues these days is people don't think they should have to follow rules they don't like. They don't think they should have to get along with people who live by a different set of rules than they do. And some of what I see you're saying is it's more like you're saying the liberal side should get to run roughshod over the religious people's opinion.
That's not what I said at all.
I didn't say that's what you said. I said that's how it comes across to me. And I hear that way too often because it seems like it's picking one of the two as to finding some sort of compromise by which both sides could at least live with the least amount of friction between them.
Yeah, and that compromise would be to allow people to have marriages that aren't, that don't need to be within these specific religious contexts. Because at the end of the day, like, how do I explain it?
But the problem is,
let me explain. Because let me explain. Even though I'm not Orthodox, if I want to get married in Israel, I have to have an Orthodox wedding. It's not so at the end of the day, it's not about the religion, it's about the interpretation. It's about forcing an interpretation on other people, not about adhering to a tradition.
I understand. And you're arguing that it should be forced over top of the tradition. And you're saying that this interpretation should, I'm telling you how it comes across. You're basically, those Orthodox people are going to be hurt if this changes. They will.
Hold on. So you're telling me that because the people who are being forced to have Orthodox weddings, despite not being Orthodox, they don't become Orthodox just because they had an Orthodox wedding.
I understand that. I'm talking about the Orthodox. This is something I learned about dealing with Christians complaining about persecution in America. How much more ridiculous can you be about crying persecution when you're the overwhelming majority? And at the time I was hearing it, you're talking 85, 90%.
And so what happens when you have a tyranny by a minority?
I understand what you're saying. Let me finish my point. My point is, those Christians were hurt by going from their superior position to equality. That hurt them. You don't have to agree whether that should hurt them or not. It does hurt them. And that's the same sort of thing that would be happening to the Orthodox there. I'm not saying that that's not a necessary pain. Just like sometimes you got to get a surgery for an appendicitis or else you're going to die from a ruptured appendix.
So why do they have the right to impose that pain on others, but others can't impose that pain on them? Seems like it should be trying to reduce as much pain for everybody as possible.
Well, not as much pain as possible. It should be as minimal, unnecessary pain.
That's what I mean. But like, I guess what I'm saying is I'm truly arguing for this equality. You hear me arguing for a liberal side when I don't think that anyone should be stepping on other people's traditions in the same way that the Orthodox shouldn't be stepping on people who aren't Orthodox's traditions. But
what I'm arguing is over where the basis of that equality needs to rest. And that basis of equality needs to rest on the individuals and their individual groups and their individual traditions. What needs to happen is those Orthodox people need to come to a peace with the other side. Neither side is working towards a mutually agreeable or least disagreeable peace. What they're both doing is drawing lines in the sand and saying it has to be our way or else. That's what I'm seeing happening.
You're ignoring the middle ground that's looking at both of them and says we need to find a compromise. You're only looking at the extremes when I'm looking at the middle. Like, I don't think that you can look at only one and not the other. But like what you were talking about this,
Part of what I'm saying is I'm applying the modern university, the whole postmodern intersectional critical theory analysis, where that is very much how these groups operate these days. Be as unreasonable and as loud as you can be, divide and conquer. And that's the problem is, if you show me the groups that are, unique groups that are actively balancing both sides and acknowledging validity in both sides.
That's what I want to see. There is that. Why? It really feels like both you and Zero are ignoring that.
I guess part of it is too often the ones that I hear touted as such come across as basically wokesters in disguise. That they're not really middle ground people. They're pretending to be in order to take out the right. I need to hear that. I need to hear that middle ground say there's something legitimate about that conservative rights position. Unless that anybody in the middle is acknowledging something legitimate about that position, they are not in the middle ground.
Graham, there's a big difference between people saying that this Orthodox rabbi should be forced to marry me and my partner who's of the same sex, or me and my partner who's of a different religion. There's a big difference between that and saying that there should be a conservative rabbinate as well as a Orthodox rabbinate in Israel. But there isn't. Currently, you're only considered a rabbi in Israel if you're an Orthodox rabbi.
Oh, I'm not disagreeing with what you're saying. What you're saying is totally disjunct from what my criticism is.
What's your criticism? I really don't understand.
My criticism is you're saying there are people in the middle. I'm saying I'm not seeing those people in the middle, because to me, if you're in the middle, you are acknowledging legitimacy on both sides. If you're in the middle and you're only acknowledging legitimacy on one side, and all you can do on the other side is criticize them and throw shade, you're not a person in the middle.
But Graham, that's not an argument either, because it's solipsistic. Just because you don't see them doesn't mean they don't exist.
To sit there and claim they exist when there's no evidence for them is nonsensical, Ariel.
Graham, there's plenty of evidence.
I'm happy to examine it. Show me the people who are embracing both sides. Show me the people who sit there and say, yes, these radically conservative people have a point, and we need to find a way for everybody to live together. Because I'm hearing that we need to change the laws to overrule it.
Who watches the Ask Project.
Thanks.
It's really, really appreciated. I've noticed lately that the amount of views are low. Contributions have gone down. It's The only way I'm able to do this project is from your contributions and sharing the videos. Please contribute. Go into the description below to see how. Guys, I appreciate so much that you guys watch these videos, like these videos, share these videos, and contribute. It's amazing. Thank you. מה אתה חושב על נישואים אזרחיים?
כל אחד שיעשה מה שבא לו.
אין לך בעיה, שזה יהיה חוקי.
אפילו מי שרוצה שידפוק חמור, זה לא מעניין.
מה דעתך לעשות חוקי?
That was clearly a joke. He's not seriously in favor of that. Of the last thing he said.
נישואים שהוא לא דרך הרבנות.
What?
I said at least we hope not.
מה דעתך לעשות חוקי נישואים שהוא לא דרך הרבנות?
אני בעד.
אוקיי, למה?
למה? כי אני לא חושב שצריך לכפות אם אנחנו מדינה דמוקרטית, לא משהו שצריך לכפות. אחותי נשואה, לא נישואים מהרבנות.
אוקיי. אין לך בעיה כנראה ש...
לא, אין לי בעיה.
What is your view of civil marriage?
I'm agreed to that because I think everyone had the opportunity or need the opportunity to create life with their partners.
Okay. Doesn't bother you if it's Jews, non-Jews, doesn't bother you?
No.
מה דעתך על נישואים אזרחיים?
סבבה.
סבבה? אתה תומך, כאילו, בעד?
הכל טוב. הכל טוב.
זה שווה לנישואים יהודים, כאילו זה אותו דבר?
מה?
זה אותו דבר כמו נישואים ברבנות?
אני התחתנתי ברבנות, הייתי מבסוט מזה. כל אחד שיעשה מה שאתה לא, הכל טוב.
What is your opinion on civil marriage?
Very good one. I think we should be able to marry whoever we want to, wherever we want to, and that we should not be always under the occupation of the Rabbanut, which is awful.
So you would want a legal marriage or options in marriage?
Of course.
Nothing to do with the rabbis?
I shouldn't be forced to get married with a certain industry, or I don't know how to call it, if I do not want to.
Monopoly, in a sense, yeah.
Exactly.
Okay. מה דעתך על נישואים אזרחיים?
אין לי מושג, לא יודע.
אין לך מושג? כאילו זה אומר של נישואים לא דרך הרבנות, שיהיה חוקי.
לא, שיהיה דרך הרבנות.
רק דרך הרבנות? מה עם אלה שהם לא יהודים או לא רוצים להתחתן דרך הרבנות? אז מה דעתך על נישואים אזרחיים?
אין לי מושג, לא יודע.
אין לך מושג? כאילו זה אומר של נישואים לא דרך הרבנות, שיהיה חוקי.
לא, שיהיה דרך הרבנות.
רק דרך הרבנות? מה עם אלה שהם לא יהודים או לא רוצים להתחתן דרך הרבנות? אז מה הם יעשו?
יש להם בעיה בחיים.
חייבים להיות זכות להתחתן, לא? מדינה דמוקרטית, ככה זה.
אני אומר את האמת, רק רבנות, רק דרך הרבנות. מי שלא יכול דרך הרבנות, יש לו בעיה. זהו.
מה הוא אמור לעשות?
לא יודע מה, שיתחזק ויחזור בתשובה ויתחתן ברבנות.
מה דעתך על נישואין אזרחיים?
וואלה אחי, מעדיף לא לדבר על הנושאים האלה.
למה?
כי יש לי חשיבה קיצונית בנושאים האלה, עדיף לא.
אז כנראה שאתה לא רוצה, כאילו אתה לא אוהב הרעיון. לא בעד. אפשר לשאול למה?
אני חושב שזאת מדינה יהודית. מדינה יהודית צריך נישואין על פי הלכה, זה הכל.
אוקיי. מה עם אנשים נגיד שהם מעורבבים, כאילו יהודים ולא יהודים?
בסדר, זה לא מה, יהודים ולא יהודים כאילו...
שרוצים להתחתן, הם רוצים להתחתן פה.
לא בעד.
בסדר, אתה לא בעד, הם רוצים. זכותם, נכון, אבל למה הם לא יכולים לעשות את זה פה? זה השאלה.
אחי, לא ציפיתי לשאלה פוליטית.
מה, את מוסלמית? אני מבין מהשם. מה דעתך על נישואים אזרחיים? אני מבין מהשם. מה דעתך על נישואים אזרחיים? זה השאלה.
אחי, לא ציפיתי לשאלה פוליטית.
מה, את מוסלמית? אני מבין מהשם. מה דעתך על נישואים אזרחיים? כאילו, לא קשור לדת. להתחתן בחוק, לא בדת.
לא, אני נגד זה.
למה?
כי זה אמור להיות כמו שצריך מול אלוהים. זה משהו שאלוהים רצה שיהיה, אז עדיף שיהיה כמו שהוא צריך.
נגיד מצב שמוסלמי ויהודי רוצים להתחתן.
מוסלמית ויהודי?
או גם, או ההפך.
אפשר שיהפכו...
הם לא רוצים להיות גם וגם, הם לא רוצים.
אז אין מה לעשות. שיתפרדו. או שמישהו יוותר.
נגיד שאם
אנחנו המוסלמים אי אפשר שנוותר, אבל שהיהודי יוותר. לצערי.
מה את חושבת על נישואים civil marriage?
נישואים
אזרחים.
אוקיי, שאלה טובה. כן, אני התחתנתי בקיץ האחרון, לפני שנה בדיוק, עם בן זוגי, עשינו חתונה חברתית.
יפה, פה בארץ?
כן.
אוקיי. למה לא דרך הרבנות?
למה לא דרך הרבנות? כי אנחנו לא רוצים לתת יד לגוף שיש לו הרבה יותר מדי כוח בחברה. אני לא רוצה שיגידו לי איך לנהל את החיים המשפחתיים שלי, אני לא רוצה שיפריעו לי בתהליכי גירושים אם יהיו ושלא יהיו, והיה לנו חשוב גם לא, התרבות היהודית מאוד חשובה לנו, הטקס שלנו היה יהודי, אבל בעיקר, כלומר כן, אבא שלי חיתן אותנו וחברה חיתנה אותנו, ואנחנו ידועים בציבור, והחלטנו לא לתת יד לממסד.
אז לא התחתנתם נגיד בקפריסין, חוקית?
לא, כי אם מתחתנים בקפריסין, אז גם תהליכי הגירושין הם דרך הרבנות, ואנחנו לא רצינו בכלל שום קשר למוסד הזה, היה לא פשוט מבחינה גם משפחתית, אבל...
אוקיי, אבל עדיין בתעודת זהות זה כתוב שאתם רווקים.
אבל יש לנו תעודת ידועים בציבור, לא זוכרת, תעודת זוגיות כזאת שהוצאנו.
ולפי מיסים ודברים כאלה זה אותו דבר?
אותו דבר, כן יש שני דברים שהם יכולים להיות בעייתיים, אני כבר לא זוכרת בדיוק מה זה, שליחות לחול, ואימוץ זה רק מעל גיל 2, משהו כזה, אבל חוץ מזה הכל אותו דבר.
If you want me to ask more questions to Israelis and Palestinians, I need to be able to...
I just want to note that there was not a single person there who was arguing for like what you are under the perception of. Politics are very, very different in Israel than they are in America.
No, but there were the majority of the people that he had there were arguing and were presenting in a position that easily covered NAMBLA. People should be able to do what they want. That there shouldn't be rules.
That's not what they were saying. They were
Ariel, word for word, they were saying.
Graham, they were arguing.
Word for word. Play it again and listen to how many of them say people should be able to do what they want. Don't try to tell me they said something other than that. This is my autism kicking in here.
They were arguing that the religious rabbinate shouldn't have the ability to dictate.
Don't give me your interpretation.
No, I'm not.
What were the words coming out of their mouth?
Were they arguing that? Nobody was arguing for that. They weren't arguing that you should be able to...
I am not going to interpretation until we first establish what the words coming out of their mouth were. Facts, objective facts first. You have the video there. The objective facts have the words on there. We have the first... Let's start with the first dude, the donkey dude. We have the donkey dude who's clearly with the NAMBLA position.
Dude, it comes across as sarcasm. You could argue, okay...
No. You don't... Saying it was just sarcasm is the narcissistic, it's just a joke defense.
Okay, so you think that he's literally into bestiality?
I think he may very well be okay with it.
Okay, that's
How can you say he's not?
Graham, this is abductio ad absurdum.
This is not falling for logical fallacies and recognizing these are people who have opinions they haven't sat down and thought through enough.
Okay, what other opinion do you have an issue with?
I have an opinion. Basically, these are the big one I have is these are people who have a position and they're saying anything should go. And I agree with you. If you sat there and brought up that, well, NAMBLA would qualify, they'd hedge on it. And that's because they've taken an unconscious, unreasoned position. Very few of these people, except the ones who supported the rabbinate, who I noticed he actually hassled. He was very aggressive to them as opposed to the other people.
Well, what I was going to say is the only thing stopping people from getting married is it says with the, like what I'm trying to explain is the shit that NAMBLA pushes, that's illegal according to Israeli law. So it doesn't matter that the rabbinate, it's
all
not
that
even
needs is the law to change, just like gay marriage did in the U.S.
No, but one is religious law and the other is civil law. They are different. Graham, I honestly think we should move on. We're not getting anywhere.
That's going to be a sticking point to me, that whole unreasoned uses of things like anything, everybody. That will always trigger my autism. It sends red flags and has since the day I was born, Ariel. Okay. And when people use that to justify political positions, it's not going to go well. Hey.
Yeah, I still only remember him being the only one who said anything.
מה דעתך לעשות חוקי נישואין שהוא לא דרך הרבנות?
אני בעד.
אוקיי, למה?
למה? כי אני לא חושב שצריך לכפות, אם אנחנו מדינה דמוקרטית, לא חושב שצריך לכפות, אחותי נשואה, לא נישואים מהרבנות.
אין לך בעיה כנראה.
לא, אין לי בעיה.
What is your view of civil marriage?
I'm agree to that, because I think everyone...
What I'm hearing is they're all saying that it should be separate from religious marriage, that they shouldn't be imposing their views on religious people, but that they should have the right to get married with... And again, the main thing is that these are consenting adults. That's the issue, which completely... I don't know why you're bringing up NAMBLA. Nobody had mentioned kids.
Well, at one point in time in Israel, it was certainly fine to marry a 13-year-old or a 15-year-old. You know, this is a laws and rules change. And my point is anything has the meaning of anything. That means you can pack everything into it. I've spent years running the modals and indeterminates in scrimmaging against each other, Ariel. This is why these sorts of things trigger me. Is because these people don't recognize the sort of thing they're saying. It's an unreasoned position that there's no way to actually turn what they're saying into functional law. And that's what, these are not people, when you say people should get to do what they want, you're not in the middle ground offering a solution.
So in Alaska, you can get married at age 14. Same in, is that
do you need your parents' permission, or is that a limitation that they're shackling unreasonably on people?
Graham, I feel like you're arguing.
Why 14? Why not 12? Why not 9 like Mohammed?
Graham, who are you arguing against?
I'm arguing against unfairness. I'm arguing against one part of society running roughshod over another part.
Wait, so But by your logic, people shouldn't have the right to tell religious people that they don't have the right to marry underage kids.
There's the religious aspect. To me, the concept of civil marriage is an oxymoron. Marriage is a religious/ceremony. Civil union is what you're registered on. Now, you can have laws against underage sex, which
and there are.
You might be able to marry a 9-year-old, but goddamn, if you do anything, you get tossed into jail. You can have your stupid ceremony. Again, I'm trying to find a solution that's going to work for everybody as reasonably as possible, as least painful, including the ridiculous extremists, who I know are never going to be happy with any middle ground solution.
Well, all I'm saying...
And the problem is I see two... Okay, go ahead, sorry.
All I'm saying is that, like, I understand, like, yeah, there's bad actors, but the thing is, as long as you make sure that it's purely an issue of religion and not legality. Because the thing is, like, you can't have sex with a child in Israel. But the thing is that what was it?
Well, think of Sharia law. There's your perfect merging of law and religion.
Well, yeah.
And ancient Israel was essentially the same thing, where law and religion was more or less the same as well.
Yes, but see, here's the thing: Israel's civil laws trump any religious law. It just so happens that marriage happens to be in the court of the rabbinate.
Yeah, which, again, that's where, if you ask me, I'm against civil marriage because that's just an oxymoron. I 100% support civil unions.
Isn't that
every marriage needs to be registered as a civil union? The civil union, the government side, shouldn't care what religion was associated with it. Each religion polices itself and how they do ceremonies.
Okay, and what I'm trying to explain is those people were not arguing for anything except that they're either for or against the right for a civil union. That's literally it. I don't know what you're arguing against there.
I'm arguing against, one, the words that are coming out of their mouths, and two, what I sense is just very little cognition going behind their position for most of the people who are everybody should get to do whatever they want.
Okay,
and
how much cognition
and I was going to say, the one woman was outright offensive with the idea of, I wanted to be outside the rabbinate because I wanted access to easy divorce. If you want access to easy divorce, what the hell are you looking to get married for? And I 100% disagree with the people that they're. Last point.
I was just going to say, before you go on that point, there's a very intricate thing that has to do with divorce in Jewish law that is not an issue in other types of marriages. So I really don't know that what you're saying is going to apply here.
Okay, there may be some technical issues there. You can understand my general sentiment there, though. You know, if you're going into it looking to unravel it in the future, you're probably not going into it under the best of motives. And I disagree with the people who said that there's a right to marriage. Marriage is a privilege.
So I have a question. Do you also hold that some of those religious people also had that same lack of cognition for why they did or didn't think so?
Oh, yeah. For a lot of them, their only cognition is, I'm downloading what my tradition tells me.
Yeah, it's like putting the cog in cognition.
Yeah. No. They're part of the religious hive mind. They haven't thought for themselves either. It's just a question of which hive mind they're downloading from. Absolutely.
It's a real big problem in the Orthodox Jewish community that doesn't get talked enough about. And the thing is that, like, there's a big difference because in Israel, the fact that the civil union is tied, like, basically, if what that means is that it doesn't matter if you get, like, if civilly, like basically you have to, your husband, if you know, if you're a woman, your husband has to grant you the divorce. If for whatever reason they're a fucked up person, they're a narcissist, and they don't want to let go of you, they can make it where you don't have the right to get married to anybody else. They basically own you. And
no, that's screwed up. I was going to say that the Mormons take that a step further, where the husband gets to decide whether or not the wife goes into heaven.
Ugh. Israel, like, it's not necessarily the case here. So, like, you know, if you're not religious, then theoretically, you know, you could be like, okay, well, it's fucked up, but technically he can't legally stop me from getting remarried. But in Israel, it can, because the two are suffused. And what that means is that that's also something that, you know, I don't think it's I'd have to look more, because I know that I know that in Islam there's something where a man can say a word 3 times and it instantly divorces him from his wife. but I know that women are able to get a divorce. Like it's not. There's also cases. So there's cases where a man's obligated to give his wife a divorce, but the thing is, I think still technically he needs to give her the get. An obligation doesn't mean that he will. It's kind of like, you could be breaking the law, but that doesn't mean you're going to stop. The point is,
I agree. From a legal. Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say that things are a lot more complicated. Also, another thing is, keep in mind, with anything media, whether it's mainstream or alternative or just small time, people are going to show a very specific angle in order to draw up audience and views. But I mean, genuinely, at the end of the day, I know a lot of religious people who see nothing wrong with having a civil union. They just don't want anything imposed on them. And then there's people who are fine with a civil union, and frankly, they don't want the association with the rabbinate, whether it's like a less religious form or whatever. But at the end of the day, it's very different. The things basically, a lot of people will say really crazy shit online. Some of them mean it, some people don't. But genuinely, the people that I see within the communities I've been a part of, it's really relatively balanced. And of course, you'll always have the crazy people on both sides, but it really ends up being that it's about maybe 60% people who are rational, 20% and 20%. And that would even be, that would be a very liberal estimate. I think more conservatively, it's probably 80-10-10. And I know that at least on this issue. I mean, the thing is, as long as you maintain that barrier between the civil and the religious, people don't tend to have an issue. It's when you start to, kind of like you were saying about implying it a civil marriage versus just people have, because at the end of the, and it's the type of thing where when you're dealing with a country that's so honestly discombobulated, because you have the religious people, you have the secular people, you have the Arabs, you have the Jews, you have the Muslims, the Christians, the people who are religious Jews, and at the end of the day, that's why the government had to concede to the civil union, because there's no way that people would continue supporting a government that didn't support them, at least in some way.
Well, no, exactly. I was going to say, the gender aspect of that is a load of BS, and the lack of flexibility. That's part of the problem when you're merging marriage and law. There, you should have had the get and all that. That if somebody wants to follow that tradition where the husband has that sort of rigid thing, well, you know what? Follow that tradition if you want, and then the wife's stuck there. But it's not like she can't get remarried. And it's not like she can't go into another civil union or even get married again in a different faith. She's just locked within that one. You see what I'm saying? Hey.
I mean, the thing that you also have to keep in mind, though, is that some of the obviously you have people who aren't religious that have an issue with it, but the people actually doing the on the ground activism, trying to fix these injustices, especially when it comes to issues with the get, it tends to be religious people. It's because they're the ones who feel like it's their responsibility to to repair the damage that it's caused, because at the end of the day, they're not saying, you should just marry without a get, but it's more so about how do they help the people get the get, and potentially even using in the future. I think it would be reasonable to if you can't get people to separate the two, then to at least use pressure from the legal side, that if someone is, not granting their wife a religious divorce, that could be considered a type of abuse that they could be charged for or something.
Yeah, I would sit there and see that the religious people, I'd wonder if they were opposed to the concept of the get, or if they were sitting or opposed to the jerk who was abusing. I think they would be opposed to the jerk, or at least some of them would be okay with the idea, as long as it's did properly. Hey.
Yeah, I mean, there are conditions where, like, if a husband doesn't fulfill like these conditions for his wife, that the wife can actually, I need to look more into the laws around marriage and divorce, but the point is that things are a lot more nuanced than they appear, and there's a whole industry about trying to make things appear very black and white, and what it's like, I don't know, I just at least with this, because I grew up in this tradition, but I mean, most of what I know, it's not even from growing up around it, which is something that needs to be kind of stated, which is why, like, maybe some of the stuff you might not be as familiar with is because a lot of this stuff is like when I actually took classes about Jewish thought and law, is where I learned this. So it's the stuff that most Jews don't even know about. But typically it's not really going to happen except for people who are relatively religious, because at the end of the day, if you're not seriously religious, then there's probably less of a chance that you would even see that as a type of abuse. I mean, I guess if you're a really abusive person, you could be like, use anything, but I think it's more likely that people who aren't religious would just be less likely to care.
Yeah, the Jewish community I grew up around was fairly evenly divided between Reformed and liberal. So that tells you what you need to know about some of those traditions are absent from my experience.
Yeah, Reformed and liberal is the same thing in terms of Judaism.
And so I thought there was a slight difference. Sorry, Ty.
So the husband was she seemed to say that the husband is allowed to marry again, but the woman isn't.
Right, because men are allowed to marry multiple wives, but wives aren't allowed to marry multiple husbands.
So that's even in there. Wow.
Well, the thing is, nobody marries multiple people anymore, but if you don't give your wife a get and you marry someone else, you're technically married to two people.
Yeah. Polygamy.
Religiously, but not legally if you got a legal divorce, which is what makes it, and see, that's the thing. Polygamy, if you were to do that legally, you could get arrested, but do it religiously, nothing that they can do. And that's why they have to use social pressure in order to get people to give their wives a get if they've been refusing. And again, I feel like there are cases where, maybe it would be justified to refuse a get. Like, say someone's going through some sort of mental crisis and they're like, oh, my husband, they're an alien, and so they're like, I need to get a divorce. They're clearly not mentally well or something. Like, yeah, I could see a reason to refuse it. But, by and large, get refusers are abusers. Ooh, that rhymes.
So you painted me as having some extreme position, and then you've proceeded to argue my position to Graham for 20 minutes, which is simply that there is a right, there should be a right, there is a basic right, whether recognized or not by the state or the system, for your own free association, for your own entering into a marriage with someone. And to advocate for that is not to advocate for absolute anarchy and no rules for anything.
Yeah.
And all I did was highlight that there are motivations. This isn't just out of nowhere. And there seems to be basically three. It's racial, it's religious, and it's gender. Protectionism.
Yeah, but see, here's the thing. Are you also going, I agree, but this is something that you have throughout almost all of the Near East.
Yeah, and that's part of the cultural evolution that we've gone through since Enlightenment. That's, you know, spotty and back and forth here and there. And apparently Graham agrees with J.D. Vance that we should repeal no-fault divorce.
Well, it's not so much that we should repeal it. My point is that anybody who's sitting there and entering the divorce with their marriage with their exit strategy in mind
is a sensible human being. Is a sensible human being that understands that human relationships can go all kinds of ways and it can become abusive, and there's all kinds of reasons to get the fuck out of it.
Yeah, like for instance, Graham.
I understand what you're saying there. Trust me. Don't try to throw shade on me about abuse, about being the recipient of abuse here. I'll stack my record up against anyone.
You're disparaging people as not serious about their relationships because they are sensible
I'm saying
and understand the trajectory of relationships.
If somebody is offering a prenup, if somebody is sitting there and has their entire exit strategy planned, that is a huge red flag to me. That one.
So don't marry them.
Wait,
as transactional.
So, can I say something though? But also, like the thing is, like, yeah, I agree. Like, if that's all they're thinking about, yeah, that's a red flag. But at the same time, I'd be more concerned about someone who wants everything in common, who's basically setting it up so that they can take half of everything you own.
Right. What it should be is they should get half of anything that we build together. It shouldn't be half of what each comes in with. You get what you come in with, and what you build together. You're holding that in common. You should split that in half. I can't imagine anything else being remotely considered fair.
Yeah, but aren't prenups? Isn't that just for before the marriage?
Well, you can have postnups as well. You can write that in after the fact as well. You can write any sort of contract under U.S. law.
But what I'm saying is, like, are you saying that all people who go into a relationship like that with a prenup, are you saying that all people like that are like they're all red flags?
No. If insisting on a prenup, if somebody is coming in, and what I'm hearing, on this one is, I want to make sure it's easy for me to exit the marriage. I don't want it to be difficult. From my standpoint, marriage is a union of two souls. What they're looking for is a civil union. What they're looking for isn't anything that I consider a marriage. It's not even, this is where I'm coming from. And what they're saying is, I don't trust this other person. 100% commit. I'm holding back. I have my reservations. It's fine. People can have reservations. They can hold back. But that's not the sort of person I would want to enter a marriage into. And to me, those are big red flags.
And that's your right.
And it's also the most sensible position for anybody that's ever been in a relationship and been through a breakup, that understands how things can deviate from a previous state.
Dude, don't talk to him like that. Like, don't. I mean, for lack of a better term, like, explain it to him. Like, I think we should just move on. But one thing I would just like to bring up is that one lady who is talking about not having to worry about, the difficulty of a divorce. It's because it is a serious problem in Jewish culture, like within Israel and the Orthodox community. Again, not something that most people do, but it happens enough that it is a serious concern that people do have to worry about that, especially if it's something.
I agree. Here's the hypothetical that I think is worth considering. Let's say my is in place where there's just the civil union, and that's the only thing that goes legally, and everything else is just the religious, trap and beyond that. Now, in that situation, you can have religions that have all sorts of unreasonable rules about divorce, but somebody can just abandon that religion and go to a different one.
But there's
So
only
you could get,
problem. What if that's their faith? That's something they don't want to abandon. You're basically telling them that they need to choose between their faith and the ability to be married.
well, no, they can get married in a different faith.
No,
They should-
but if it's their faith to do that would be heretical.
And isn't that what every person faces at some point in time, if push comes to shove? Whether they're going to go with what their tradition says or what they see inside them as the truth is.
The one woman who was talking about getting out of the divorce, and the reason was in being in a civil union. It was entirely about the machinations of the interaction with the state. Nothing to do
and
with
I'm
state of her,
100% saying Mary should.
nothing to do with the state of her marriage and her relationship with the person, because somebody can have an amicable breakup, and yet they still have to disentangle in terms of state.
Yeah, there's cases where even if it is amicable breakup, was this there is some really weird shit that's gone on with gets, like where both people want the get, but then for whatever reason, here.
I often get
like I
asked
said,
about my
in my
personal
opinion,
journey
that
in
should be
life.
totally removed from any sort of legal standing. That should have no bearing on the law.
So can I explain? That's what the people who you had an issue, you put a flag on what they were saying. They were simply arguing that the law and the religion should not be linked in that way.
Oh, I understand what you're saying there. Part of what I was saying is by moving it to a more fair state overall in society, you're hurting those religious radical on the right. And
Those religious people. Those religious people are not prohibited. They're not prohibited.
That they're getting hurt.
They are not prohibited in any way from practicing their religious tradition, whereas they are prohibiting these other people from getting married.
Yeah.
It's one group that is prohibiting the other. The one does not prohibit the other. Secularism protects religious liberty.
I agree with you there. What I'm saying is it's like the loss of, the whole religious right in America crying foul that they were being persecuted.
Wait.
When you've been placed on an unreasonable pedestal and be given power that you shouldn't have, it needs to be taken away. But when it's taken away, you're being hurt. You're losing your status. You're losing power. And all I'm saying is I'm acknowledging the fact, the obvious objective fact, they are being hurt in this process.
They're not being hurt. They're losing power over other people. They're not losing their own power.
Having power over other people and losing it is to be hurt.
No, it isn't.
Wait. Hold on. So, but with narcissists can be hurt, but that doesn't mean that their hurt should, be more important than the hurt of the people that they cause.
Did you miss where I led off with? It's a necessary pain. Society needs to have it happen. But you can't in my opinion, to sit there and say those people aren't being hurt is to ignore an essential part of the equation, an essential part of the process. And it's going to hurt the overall process because those people need to at least get a pat on the back and saying, this needs to happen. You shouldn't have had this all along. You're just like the rest of us. You're a good person. You need to be just like the rest of us rather than putting yourself up on an unreasonable pedestal.
Meanwhile, all along they're downloading their bullshit into other people's lives.
Like, there's a difference.
Who is? Who doesn't do that?
I mean, to be fair, that's
People that are marrying each other and not prohibiting religious people from marrying each other. They are minding their own damn business. They're not doing anything to that other group.
You guys are arguing past each other because, like, at the end of the day, I think it's simply, okay, they can feel that they're being hurt, but, like, I mean, I guess you could say they're being hurt because they feel that they're being hurt, but they're not actually being harmed. The hurt they feel is self-caused.
Harm is the word, yes. And it's really like the white in America, who now that they see there's a demographic shift and that they are not going to always be reigning supreme, they got their fifis hurt.
No, I think it's a bigger problem that white, straight men are excluded from diversity, equity, and inclusion. I see that as a bigger problem.
Anyway, here, let's move on.
Experience leaving the Hasidic community. Today, I want to share with you a very personal essay that I wrote many years ago while I was leaving the Hasidic community. This reading doesn't reflect where I am in my life now, but will give you a little bit of insight in that moment as I left the Hasidic community. So here goes.
Ready?
Yeah. I remember you told me once that you like to watch me take off my rings. You said that all of my stubbornness comes through when I try to wrench them off. You said it teasingly, laughing at me lovingly, pulling my sweaty hands apart and slipping the wedding band off my finger. Do you remember that now, as I removed my ring and set it on the rabbi's desk in the study room of large Jewish text next to my coat and bag, looking as white as I did the day our marriage began? Do you see me trembling, my stubborn perseverance hanging on to its last fight, my willfulness failing with our marital end? I wonder if you look at me with my fingers naked of your gold, shaking, aching for your comforting bond to return. But your bearded faces turn to your father and brothers. You talk amongst each other somberly. You're wearing your gartel over your calf-length suit jacket. It's what you wear for special events, for occasions like this monumental one, when you are to make me, I who crept into your arms, and I who lost a child with you, and I who is the mother of your wide-eyed baby, a stranger. It seems like yesterday that you wore this gartel to Hanukkah candle lighting, and you sat by the window in the glowing menorah. You bounced our baby on your knee, smiling at me proudly, but you won't look at me now. I'm a stranger. I'm far away from your familiar touch, a million heartbeats apart, miles into my stubborn hell, a gaping chasm of religious difference dividing us towards an inevitable end. An intimidating but kindly rabbi asks me to check my hands to make sure I took off all my jewelry. I vaguely know that it's a tradition at the get not to have a kinyan or an accessory on you, which is parallel to the same tradition we observe on our wedding day. The rabbi talks to me. He explains the process. He looks at me, not behind me or at his desk. You won't look at me, but he does. His acknowledgement of my presence feels so kind, it threatens to emit a warmth that'll melt my brittle facade of bravery. I don't want to let them see me cry. I don't want to let them see how I feel in this upstairs synagogue study on this sad day of parting. I'm the only woman in the room filled with Hasidic men. I don't know most of them, but I can guess they know of me. Everyone around is blurred by a terrible weakness in me. Even you, I don't see clearly. The scribe is finishing writing the religious divorce document by hand. He uses a parchment and an archaic feather pen. It's all just a lot of procedure. I hear my heart beating. I look at you, and you glance at me before you refocus on your little huddle of the grown men of your family. I know you hear my heart. I'm still alive. My heart still pounds its stubborn melody. You know it does, even though I stumbled on a path you do not want to walk with me. I'm not so innocent or moldable anymore, I agree, but I'm still the same Satmar girl. Even though I read books and found my voice and ask for a life of more rights and liberty, that same heart you knew from its fragile first days as your 18-year-old wife, it beats in me. Now it thumps, whacks, bangs its stubborn sound. It calls to you, the only man I've ever known. Yoelish. You do not hear the voice of a stranger. You walk towards the scribe to whisper something into his ear. The proceedings take long and I feel cold. I fix my eyes on my warm coat on the table, but I can't see anything except a veneer of tears. We bought this coat together. It has a swing and opened wide with my expanding figure when we awaited Shlemila. I'm not alone, Yoelish. I have friends who support me and will comfort me when your familiar reassurance is gone. But they struggle to understand me. They won't appreciate that I can feel this way at a time of betrayal and divorce. They don't know how far I've come with your support, only to come too far, beyond the territory you wanted to support. They cannot comprehend that even though I love you, the role of a wife and mother that is required from that love is not something I can give you. They won't understand that sometimes we're confronted with diverging convictions, and as desperately as we hold on to the relationship, our beliefs drive a knife through the bond. Our virgin marriage has become too small for our growing differences. It is time to let go. The rabbi wants me to step over to where you stand. I walk cautiously to you, Yoelish. Oh, I am coming. I can smell your familiar sweat. My head swims with memories of your nightgown and sisses and our bedtime talks. My body relaxes with comfort that quickly goes cold, with a realization that standing so close will only be followed by standing apart forever. Forever, Yoelish. Can you live without me? Forever? Forever? And our Shlemila? I stand in front of you a hug's distance. I cry quietly. A cathartic release surges and sobs as I stand here in this frightening room with you, my husband, in front of me. I hear you sniff. I feel comfort, relief by your presence.
This is really weird.
Oh, I miss
I
you
have
already.
no clue why.
You're given the divorce parchment rolled.
A parent? This is so fucking weird. It says stream unavailable, stream suspended for policy violations. I have no clue what it's talking about. Trying to see if I got some sort of email. What the fuck? This is so bizarre.
And that was me ranting.
Yeah,
Sorry.
probably. Maybe all the mention of that one organization.
Copywriting of her written sort of poem essay.
I don't think so.
If it has a way to detect that it's being rebroadcast.
Oh, damn it.
Yeah, they do have that copyright sort of thing.
Shit. One.
Yeah, that's just a flag.
Well, no, like it's actually just. Maybe I can. Let me try something. Hopefully this works. See, edit. How do I do this?